Are we live? Are we live? Are we live? I haven't got the little
It says
symbol
live.
up
Says
there.
live.
It says
Well,
live.
it's
Excellent.
counting.
Right, it says my computer's slow. Just my computer's slow as always. Now it says I'm live. Right, and it's 15 seconds late saying I'm live. Thank you, computer. Good evening, everybody. It's time for this week's Midweek Geek. We're starting a little later than usual because I've been out and about watching my daughter play football. And I am joined by a very fulsome panel tonight. Look at this. Look at this. It's six of the finest gamers from around the globe. Before we say hello to them, I'm going to say hello to everyone in chat. Yeah, I think because chat have been passing the time away with a bit of banter by the looks of things. We've got Doofs with us on the stream, and there's El and Al Halakar. Elfbait's been in chat before joining us here, or maybe after joining us. I don't know what time you turned up. You got here before me. Mage's Musings was the first one to lurk here. That's why he's on just beside me on the screen. I always do it in order of arrival. Bear's around, and we've got Daniel and RW Bishop and anybody else? Anybody else? Just say we've got 12 people watching already, which is good. And they've been hello, Mercurius Orlicus. So
That's a new name.
I've seen that name before, and here's Jake Actual as well. So I actually got back, and no, Sorian. I got back home 6 minutes before the stream was about to start, threw some dinner in the microwave, and the dinner is sat in front of me at the moment. So I'm going to put myself on mute for a couple of minutes and just sort of lurk away from the camera while everyone on the panel just quickly goes around talking about what games they've been playing over the last week or so. So over to you, chaps, and I'll talk again in a minute.
All right, Sean, you go first.
Yeah, it's been an all OSE weekend for me. I think we had my OSE game Friday where the team came together and took down 2 Wyverns, mostly first level group. So now they're all mostly second level and third level because they got a good haul. Then John's OSE games on Saturday morning and afternoon. That wasn't yours, Gingerbeard. It was, you weren't DMing this past Saturday. It was Gene, right? But sometimes you're there. There's the DM. But yeah, so that was fun. My half orc is creeping ever closer to level 2 after 8 sessions, and I won't let John forget it. It's taking so long. And then in a non-D&D way, we played Firefly, the board game, on Saturday with some friends, which is always a lot of fun. If you're into Firefly, it's as close to the feeling of the show that a board game can get. It's not bad. And that's my exciting weekend. Over to you, Oscar.
Right. So I had my second edition. That was basically just role playing. They were in a meeting with Storm Giants, negotiating an alliance between themselves and the Storm Giants. Effectively, the players do not want to make any form of allegiances with dragons, as they now want to take the battle on the offensive against the local lich that's in the area. So they want meaty and chunky allies for that. So a lot of role playing done for that, and an allegiance was struck. They will have support from the Giants up to a year worth of campaigning. However, in that same year, the players have to go out and acquire a relic, and they will be requiring to return back to the Necromancer Empire that one of the players are from. So I've got the next, well, probably the next year more or less panned out from that session alone. So I'll be busy handling that. And then I had the game with Eli attending, where we were once again trotting along, dealing with fish people and other consequences. And it ended on quite a good combat with Eli's character showing the wind how to move his weapon around.
Oh my god, it's ridiculous.
So, yes, very good game, I think. I'm interested to see what happens from there on out. So I've got a little bit of homework for that to do. But overall, quite good. And I am resurrecting a one-player, one DM game that's been on hiatus due to my work-life balance. So that should be continuing this Friday. With my plans is to throw the player into the caves beneath the city, as a dark Naga has been discovered. Before we went on hiatus, the Naga had come up and tried to kidnap a child to eat it. So yeah, that's me.
Of course, a human child would be veal to a Naga, I think. Yeah.
I'm just kind of thinking, wow, what an extreme GM. He's going to throw the player into a dark cavern. It's going to really get you invested in this.
Listen, I believe in immersion, so there's nothing like just sticking the player into a dark place and throwing water at them, going,
It
"There."
rolls the dice on the table again, or
Hardcore LARP.
Exactly.
I'm just going to quickly dive in to say hello to Thief Keith. Daniel, we've got the 6 at the moment. We can go more. But when you get more in, people tend to talk across each other a little too much. I think 6 is probably the right number. So I know, Elfbait, you've got to go, haven't you, in about an hour and a half. So
about an hour and a half, yeah.
About an hour. Okay, so when you drop, Daniel, you're more than welcome to fill Elfbait's shoes. And Gingerbeard will probably go to bed at 10 o'clock anyway, because he's becoming an old man nowadays, aren't you, Ginger? Yes.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
I'm
sorry. Sorry, I was asleep in your Call of Cthulhu games.
Okay. Doof, have you played any games recently?
I'm only running my AD&D game. I had 4 sessions last week, with the highlight being the top druid being bonked by a cleric thanks to the confusion of a Gloomwing. That's about it.
Bonked as in hit with a mace, I hope.
Yep.
Oh, good. Because it does have another meaning in English, of course. I'm going to say hello, Straw Piglet. Hello, Shadow and Sun. Hello, Omanal. How you doing? Eli, Monsieur Elfbait.
Other than playing Insaxious' game on Sunday, not much. And in that game, yes, I whiffed every attack roll made with my character in the entire game, except for the last one. I had 5 or 6 misses in a row where I didn't roll over 9 with a +5 bonus to hit. And then went to switch out my dice, test rolled my 3 dice, rolled a 16, a 17, and a 19 on the test rolls, and then promptly missed every actual attack roll after that with the new die until the final attack that I made.
Silly human. Dice will not be tested.
It was ridiculous. Here I am out there with my 2-handed sword looking like an idiot fighting this one freaking exploding sea zombie. Looked like all those really poor lightsaber YouTube videos,
Oh, it was abysmal. Come to think of it, it was something to behold, and it was just fun seeing the entire group just going along, just like, oh, here's an event. Let's go and see. Let's poke it with a stick, and oh look.
Well, we did avoid having to fight 135 Kuotoa that were all in one building.
Yeah, that's true. You did also free 2 people from being enslaved and sacrificed.
We did, and then we had to go poke the altar, and then when the Death Cleric was trying to bury the sacrifices we found there at sea, we then summoned monsters, which we promptly ran away. And then because we weren't here to fight these, and then on the way back we were camping on the beach, and we got a warlock who decided to argue over semantics. He comes down, quaffs a potion, tosses a stick into the water. A bunch of bloated zombies come out of the water, and when we finally beat the zombies and beat him up, and we're like, "You're the necromancer." He's like, "I'm not a necromancer." We're like, "Well, what are you?" He's like, "I'm a warlock." I'm like, "Seriously? We're going to quibble? You showed up with evil intent. You're selling people into slavery, and you literally just called the undead from the ocean, but you're not a necromancer." I'm like, fine,
Yeah.
you don't have the certificate of necromancy from whatever mail order school you went to, but you literally are like you're an unlicensed contractor. Okay, you're still a necromancer by trade.
I don't have the student debt. Please respect it.
It's like the barbarian saying, "I'm not a warrior. I'm not a fighter." It's like, look, what do? You fight.
It's like it's fine. You didn't get you didn't go to school for necromancy. Your uncle gave you a job, and you learned on the job, but you still have the same trade.
Anyway, we're going over to Gingerbeard and his penance. All right, how are you doing, Ginger?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm not a necromancer as well. I just like having sex with corpses.
It's a necrophiliac.
He knows. But much like the warlock, he's going to quibble.
I'm not even going to click the monetized stream on this one. Then I guess.
I've been very careful to not drink to have a beverage that I can fit in my Andre the Giant sized hands, so you can't see that it's alcohol.
He has got big hands. We have of course met, so you can confirm that I am quite short and you are quite tall.
Yeah.
There you go.
Relatively to each other.
Yes. Yeah. So
what did I do? So yeah, I played in your Call of Cthulhu game up until the point that I fell asleep. Sorry about that. It's happened multiple times. It's not anything to do with your games mastering.
Just to do with the fact that Thursdays seem to be cursed for you.
Not Thursdays. Any weekday games. I just I'm very much a get up early, go to bed early person. This has been this is a rare occurrence for me because I'm allowed to drink today for reasons. So the sugars that are filling my bloodstream from the alcoholic beverages will keep me going for quite a while.
Good.
And then on Saturday, I played in Particularist, who some of you may know from Aaron the Pedantic server. His game, which is a weird thing, it's homebrew rules, plus it's his homebrew virtual tabletop, because he acknowledged that Owlbear 2.0 might not be the tool that people want. So
Owlbear 2.0 nuked itself. I went to go use it the other day. I'm like, I have no idea what the hell's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, Doof adapted pretty quickly. You can adapt to it.
It's not good. It's horribly optimized.
It destroyed everything that made Owlbear Owlbear.
Yeah. So this guy, Particularist, has made his own virtual tabletop. So it's kind of weird playing on a Saturday, because it's like half focusing on his rules that he has made and half focusing on his virtual tabletop that he has made.
Sounds very hipster.
Yeah. Well, look at me. Look at my fucking dungarees.
No, I meant him with his own. I've got my own version, my own little microbrew VTT, and
yeah. Well, that's why I'm so attracted to his game. Fellow hipster. But no, it was good. I am kind of glad that I'm just playing like a sword and board fighter there. I think if I had to do more stuff in his game, I would not be able to focus on all the things I'm meant to be focusing on. So, yeah.
Right, hello from the hilt and hello, Fiore. Nice to see you guys here as well. We finished up our Call of Cthulhu campaign last Thursday, and because the party of 4 are not warrior types in any, they've got no physical skills in the party. Gingerbeard were 0 pretty much, weren't they? Yeah. And I knew there might be a little bit of scrapping at the end. I let a much loved NPC go along with them into the final battle, knowing that I knew it would kick off at some point. Gingerbeard's character survived by virtue of the fact that he'd fallen asleep, so he really wasn't there. General Nutt's character survived by the fact that he decided he wouldn't go across to the final battle. He'd look after some NPCs that needed helping. And the other 3 characters who went across, who were played by Art and Eldarian, and an NPC, got stuck in at the end against all these cultists, and they had to carry out a ritual to destroy the blood red fez. And if you successfully carry out the ritual, you cause all wearers of the fez, you cause their heads to explode. Now, when I ran this last time with another group, they all thought that they had more chance to carry out the ritual if they all put fezzes on. This group didn't do that, thankfully, but still, the one who carries out the ritual actually does survive, but the face gets horribly melted and disfigured, and that was Eldarian's character. And he went mad and ran off into the sea and tried to drown himself. He got picked up by fishermen. But yeah, he was maimed and insane. The NPC, who had some shooting skills, rolled absolutely abysmally and got disemboweled by Turkish swordsmen. Poor old Miss Mackenzie, fine upstanding Scottish lady who liked her whiskey. She died. And the other one who died was Art's character, who stood alongside her trying to hold the stairs from the onrushing cultists, and he croaked. He got stabbed to death as well. So 2 dead PCs, 1 insane PC, and 2 survived because they weren't there. Which is how Call of Cthulhu was meant to be. Then Saturday, played in Gene's game with I brought in a new paladin because I couldn't find my other character sheet, and he survived and got lots of XP, which is quite good. He's a very, very arrogant, loves himself, long, luscious hair and big rippling muscles type who really is really confident of his own ability. I want the players to hate him, and I think they do already. And then on Saturday evening, I ran my one, and Sean's getting all salty because once again, he played in a session where not much XP was given out. Give you an idea, Sean's playing a fighter. He's about 3/4 of the way to level 2. General Nuts playing a magic user. They haven't always played in the same sessions. They've played about the same number of sessions, and General Nuts magic user has just reached level 2. So I don't always give out not a lot of XP. It's just that Sean's managed to miss all the sessions that have given out nice, juicy chunks. That's the way it works out.
Curse my half-orc luck.
Yeah.
Rename yourself to Ye Old Mudcore Man.
No. They've got some decent items now. I mean, it's OSE. You do get a few decent items along the way. And items make characters in old school games. And Monday, our game was called off because 2 people weren't feeling well. One guy had to work away in Nottingham and was staying away. We tried to arrange something online.
Did he survive?
He did, because we didn't play. We tried to play.
No, I meant in Nottingham.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I haven't heard from him since, actually. We tried to get the remnants of the group together, but one guy's internet didn't work, so we gave up. So I just taught one guy about OSE for about an hour and a half, and then that was that. So there we go. That's a bit of gaming. We've done some gaming. So let's get started. Tonight's topic is house rules. And by that, we quite generally we're going to be referring to semi-official house rules, where you make nice typed up documents for your players to consult, and possibly the idea of agreeing to house rules, or how you come up with house rules, why we use them. Fiore, I'm going to say he hasn't played basic D&D before, this particular player. So I just had to. I was converted. It was previously a 5e campaign, and I refuse to run 5e now. And I've just given up with it. And he was playing a druid, and obviously in 5e he was reliant on his shape shifting and all that sort of stuff, which he doesn't get at the level he's at. So I was talking him through all the range of different druid spells and how the different mechanics work, because he's used to playing 5e. So he's keen to play. He's keen to try, because he likes the idea of playing a very different style of druid with a different range of spells. So we'll see how that goes. But most of it was spent just talking through spell effects and what they do, and because he hasn't got any of the books, so I'd got all the druid spell list in front of me from my books, and we were reading through them and going through all the bits and bobs and just converting his character sheet. So anyway, house rules. First things first. Is anyone here the type of person who likes to play rules as written wherever possible and not rely on house rules?
Me currently.
Yeah.
You currently. And Gingerbeard, you prefer games played with rules as written in general?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
And
if it's usually I try to stick to the rules as they are, like from the get go. But I know that I
Right.
will eventually, with time, things will deviate. So it's mainly because I prefer to establish a baseline of here's where we are, and then from there we then build it up, and I will introduce things as we play along.
yeah. I mean, I would agree that when you start a game, you should always start with the basic rules as written of the game, just the basic framework of the rules, and try all the bits and pieces out to see whether they work for you.
Mhm.
And if they don't, then you modify them.
I'm upset that actually I was expecting DK to be here. I see him in the comments. Are
Yeah.
you there, DK? I feel like are you there, DK? Can we summon you from the ether? Because I know
Twice if
DK.
you're here.
DK tends to he, bless him, will look through a rule set and feel that something is lacking or something, and then he will add a bunch of house rules into a channel, and then
Is this before he's actually played it?
yeah,
Or,
well,
see,
you
I
know,
won't
before
do
the
that.
players have engaged with it. But that's
Right.
why I was hoping that he'd be here, because he'd present that kind of thought about it.
I think it does depend on how familiar you are with the general mechanic of the game, though, because there's a lot of OSR games that are based around very, very similar core mechanics. So you'll have that framework of the core mechanics already committed to memory. That's the idea, and a lot of the differences between the games are the bolted on bits around the edges, the little subsystems, the fluff, the different character classes, different races, different settings, different weapons, all that sort of stuff. I know some OSR games have deviated a little bit more, but the framework is very, very similar across pretty much most of the ones I've seen. Am I right or am I wrong?
I haven't seen
There's
it.
a lot of overlap for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that way I can forgive a little bit of tinkering before you've actually played it. So okay, different question then. So we Elfbait, I mean, you didn't put your hand up to say you prefer rules as written.
I like to start with the basis of the rules.
So very similar to me in that sense.
But I will say that, especially on the wargaming front, if I can draw from that experience too, I will start tinkering with and homebrewing crap just on like my first read through, because so many games are full of my brain just gets going. Like I'll read through the rules, I'm like, this lore is awesome, and then I'll read through, I'm like, why the fuck isn't this in the army? It is now. Same thing with RPGs. Like if I read through the RPG, especially like you're saying with OSR type stuff, it's like, oh look, the 14th version of D&D I've read this year. You can start tinkering with it, and you're like, okay, well, clearly I'm gonna want this. I don't like this the first 3 times I've played this, so I'm gonna go ahead and just out the gate change that. So
okay, and Sean, I know you play with a lot of the rules in AD&D that people throw out anyway, but I know you've also got a page or 7 of house rules.
I do, yeah. I mean, I like to default to rules as written as the base, as you said before, and build from there. But mainly, this day and age, when I'm lazy and don't like coming up with a million rules, I usually use house rules to finesse things that aren't necessarily clear in the rules, or things that just aren't intuitive. Like first edition unarmed combat is a bloody nightmare. Are you still there?
Unarmed combat is the shit, man.
You like first edition unarmed combat?
Yeah, I don't love it. So I simplified. I just port. I don't house rule. I guess I mean, you can argue it's a house rule or not, but it's an existing codified rule from Second Ed. I port in from the combat and tactics. It fits seamlessly, so I just use that version.
I just imagine gaming with Sean being like, "Welcome to the game. My name is Sean. Here's your employee handbook." But
Right, so it looks like around the table, I'm guessing Doof probably uses the fewest house rules.
I have one.
You have one.
Yeah, and that is just the rule from the Pedantic March, where you're allowed to have a number of characters equal to your strongest character's level.
Okay, and that's the only house rule across all the. And do you play with all the rules? I mean, you run AD&D. Do you play with all the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide, all the ones you can remember? I mean, is that...
I try to use as many as I can, but
it is impossible. It's impossible to use them all. Yeah. There's
You need a system. You need like a procedure. Like for me, the big ones being a weapon types, the weapon qualities, and weapon type versus armor. And it's just a matter of conditioning the players to think of them as two categories. You've got your armor type and you've got your armor class. And then you can easily tell them, okay, well, you're going for armor type 10, right? Oh, they can look on their chart. Well, I got +4 versus armor type 10 or whatever. Then they know they can do the modifications. It's pretty easy to implement, but you have to have a bit of a system to remember it.
It does require a little bit of preparation, does it?
I find VAC to be really easy to implement if you add it to your matrix and beforehand.
Well, I use character sheets with the weapon type adjustments right on the sheet so they can fill them in. They've got them right there. And as a DM, I've got the weapon chart right on my screen. So I can, when I've got a random enemy and I haven't planned for it, it's like, oh, they've got a spear. I can look down here. So, yeah.
I mean, I tend to run AD&D at a fairly breakneck speed. So I just use Thaco. But I'm aware of the repeating 20s. They just rarely, they come into play so rarely, it doesn't matter anyway. But I just use Thaco. I don't touch the weapons versus armor.
So you use pure Thaco as opposed to the I use the repeating 20s. Again, it's just having a system. It's like you can either say, okay, if you roll a natural 20, just add 5 to your roll, or have the fixed number, the lowest possible number. So like if somebody's Thaco 20, the lowest they can hit on a 20 is -5, so that you know that's your starting point, right?
I mean, I've got the repeating 20s fixed in my mind anyway. I know where they are for the characters, so and for monsters. So that's I know when it can crop up. And I say 95% of combats, they just don't crop up. It's unless your mage has a habit of getting into combat with armored warriors, it's not going to happen. But anyway, so house rules. The process you go through bringing house rules to your table. If you're going to use a house rule, I mean, I know it's the in thing nowadays to okay your house rules with your players and all that sort of stuff. Last time I ran 5th edition, I basically said, these are my house rules. If you want me to run 5th edition, we will use them. That was my approach. If you don't want to use these, we'll play something else. And I tend to be a bit like that with the way I run games, simply because I have so many different games to play now. I'm not stuck with one game. I'm running multiple games on the server of different systems at the moment. So as far as I'm concerned, it's entirely up to the DM what house rules are used. The players choose whether they want to sit and play in the game or not. Do you have any specific procedures regarding your house rules, regarding players?
Well, if I use my Saturday group, when I first got everyone together, I made a sheet and said, these are the house rules I want to implement, but then not all of them are going to be gelling. So I want to go through them with the players and go, right, this is the purpose of this house rule. Here's what the intention is of this, and so on, so that they knew like why I had certain rules and what the outcome or what the desired outcome was, so that we could sit as a group and say, well, what kind of game do we want, and what rules are we okay with, bringing in, because we've got second edition base as is, and then I've got my own to sort of add in. Like, I really enforce the fact that when a wizard wants to learn a new spell that is not a part of their leveling up, then they have to dedicate 1d4 plus the spell level to in amount of days that they have to study to then learn that, so that it forces the group to think about when the wizard sits down and do their studying, and then they have to be careful about their travels and so forth. And then that was to sort of like put a lot of emphasis about, you need to know where you're going. And in this specific group's case, they decided that we have to only be X amount of distance away from the town. The other way I go about it is when we play, for example, I'll use the 5th edition game where I'm playing with Eli. We at one point went, right, we saw a situation where there's a moment where you can be tactical about a ruling within base 5th edition, and we had a quick discussion of, right, how are we going to interpret this rule? Because the DM can rule it one way, the players can understand it another way. We need to quickly come to an agreement for how we're going to be seeing what constitutes a 5-foot, or what the range of threat is for enemies, and
Yeah,
where
it was
you
the
can move.
opportunity attack rule is what we were talking about. Yeah,
Exactly, and we had to figure out, can you move around the square that's around a character that's on the battle map, because you're technically not leaving the threat of opportunity, or leaving the threat area. So are you able to then move it around? And it was then agreed that yes, you can move around, but you're not allowed to leave that 5-foot square. But then that in turn means that I can do the same, which I like, because that now means that players who go into combat are not limited to only staying in one specific square on the map. They can now move around the enemy, and players can now do team ups. So you will have one in front, one in back, but the same thing is now also possible for the enemies of doing exactly the same thing. So it means it becomes more versatile in that sense. So for me, it's down to what's beneficial for the game. Will this bring a positive outcome for the group and for the game?
yeah. Ultimately, our ruling was supported by the rule, because I was able to look up the rules, and I'm like, oh, that's how it works, anyways. All right. So
just gonna quickly say, Omanal's waiting in the wings. I'm sticking it to 6 people at the moment. So when people do drop out, I'll bring in more people. So if you want to hang around in the background, you're fine, Omanal.
It's my bedtime. I will say that is the joy of the English language being so ambiguous.
Yes.
Is that collectively, but actually all languages are ambiguous. It's just English has more ambiguities than others. But, collectively, you, as DM and players, you come to a ruling on an ambiguous situation, and then that sets a precedent. Who could tell that I used to fucking teach law? That sets a precedent for all your future sessions. And that's a kind of nice thing where you have an edge case. And then from then on, it just says, right, this is going to be decided like this. And then your players start building off it. Because they're like, that works like that. I'm going to start focusing on how I can do that. Anyway.
I mean, yes, that's how house rules can evolve in that way. And yeah, we do. I mean, I'll do the same sort of thing from time to time. But with that particular group in question, it was a 4-page document of rules of things I didn't like about 5th edition that I had to change in order to run it. And did they read it? I think some of them did, but certainly some of them made a few.
Too much. It's too much to throw at people straight away. What are you, DK? Like,
the thing is, I'd been playing with them for a long time, and they knew what I liked and what I disliked. So, as far as I was concerned, I was just solidifying, putting it down in writing, the things I'd already talked to them about that I didn't like about the system.
Well, it also is a question of what's the group like, Because if it's I speak from the experience of having had to start from scratch with numerous groups where no one knew anything or knew anyone, and then having to then go, right, here is a 12-page document of rulings, backgrounds, and so on. Many players from such an environment will look at that and go, oh, okay. I don't know if this is the kind of commitment. I would just want beers and chips and chill and do bullshit. Then it's all about establishing what is and isn't wanted at the very get go.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, go on, whoever want to dive in then.
I haven't done it. I was going to say that for me, I'll usually talk about a house rule with my players ahead of time. I'm not authoritarian enough, nor do I actually buy into that. That's even a thing that GMs should really double down on, to say this is how we're going to play my way. Or I would rather play a game than really get bogged down into playing it my way.
The simple fact of that game for me was I openly didn't really like 5th edition, but we wanted to get together to play something online during the pandemic when we couldn't meet up.
But I'm also the type of player who will just get up from a table and say "fuck this" and walk away if I don't like how it's being played. I mean, I literally walked away from a Warhammer 40K game. The guy was being a jerk. We were setting up games, got all our stuff, and I said, "All right, never mind." Just swept all my stuff off the table into a box and walked out. So I'm like, bye.
Fair enough.
It's not important enough for you. But that's an extreme case. I mean, I would rather work with my players to come up with something mutually satisfying for all of us, because we're all going to be playing it. Also, if my players don't want to house rule a game, they came to me as a GM with the expectation of playing a specific game. And so house rules are kind of an option on top of that. Like, if you're coming to me to play D&D and I want to house rule the crap out of it, but you don't want to play with those house rules, it's really on me to convince you why we should be using those, rather than say, well, this is the game you wanted to play, but we're going to play something different. We're going to play Eli's version of D&D. And hopefully there's a discussion that'll go on there and we'll reach a mutually,
the key for me, I'm a firm believer that if the DM isn't really gelling with a system, isn't really enjoying a system, the game is doomed. So it was a way to make 5th edition palatable for me. And the players knew, but I'd already stopped running 5th edition for them a little while beforehand and told them, look, these are things I'm frustrated with. I really don't like it.
I wasn't speaking towards your case specifically. No. I mean, your situation is, that is the sort of situation I would say it's okay to come in with a list of things that you will and won't do, because you're kind of basically saying, look, I'm not going to run this, and this is how we can play it, because I don't want to run this. But if you want me to run this, this is what we have to do. Yeah. I don't like Chinese food. I do, but if we're going to order it, we're going to order these things because I can stomach them. So.
Dick who orders black bean paste and that shit. I love black bean paste. Anyway, I was going to bounce out because Almanau wanted to come in. I will still say that I think everything's going like I think Doof and me. Like, you start with raw, and then you kind of organically develop from there. I think that is the way.
Okay, well, cheers, Ginger. Will we see you this weekend in any of the games that we're playing?
No, you might physically see me. I'll be in Shropshire, where my wife has an archery tournament.
I won't be in Shropshire. I know you'll probably go through where I live to get there. So
drive straight through your house.
Drive by and hit the horn real hard. Meep.
Yeah, no, I've had a recommendation that there is an excellent pizza place in Shrewsbury, so I'll be popping into Oil and Dough, hopefully, if we've got time. But yeah, I will be in the West Midlands. I was going to make a joke about Wednesbury, because that's our in joke about Call of Cthulhu, but given that the Crooked House burnt down the other day, felt
It's a
out of
shame.
order.
It's a dodgy insurance fix up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
an insane insurance fix up.
Absolutely. It's so
Anyway,
blatant.
getting
Anyway,
distracted. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will see you all. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Right, so I'm going to add in Umanal, and if Daniel, if you want to still want to pop in, just sit and wait in the stream because people will drop in and out at some point. I know.
Yeah, I got an hour.
Elfbait's got about an hour, so let's add an Omanal. Who will add an
I didn't want to feel cheated. It's just I can hear you better than sit in the background than I can on YouTube. So I don't want to feel gingery like I have to leave. But I think it was really an excuse like I need to go to bed. And this guy's
There've been quite a few Thursdays. It's become a bit of a meme. It's like Ginger, over to you. And you don't hear anything.
I've heard that
Ginger?
a few times. I've been lurking and listening to games. I'm like, is he gone?
I know you all talk about it, but usually what I found is you try playing raw initially, and there are two things that happen. One is you find a rule doesn't work for the kind of campaign or setting you want to do, and so you change it. Usually, it's not capricious, which I think is what sometimes people feel about house rules. It's usually evolved in, hey, this mechanic isn't working like we feel it should in the game, or it's reducing the enjoyment of certain players or things. And sometimes that means you're reducing the power, or you're increasing it, or things of that.
And he's gone.
And he's back.
Oh,
Well,
and he's back. He's back. Is he back?
Oh,
He's back.
He's back.
But I feel in some ways, and we talk about house rule. If I have to house rule a game so much that I would just be better off playing another system, I'll just use the other system.
There's the balance now, isn't it?
Well, examples 5e to change 5e to kind of the feel that I would want requires so much effort that I might as well pick a different game system, and that's the way I feel about it. And it's usually because players are abusing the system rather than just trying to say, I'm going to do what's cool and seeing how it impacts. It's usually like, well, I know this mechanic. If I do this one, then I do this one. And you're going, all right, look, you're trying to min-max everything to the point that it's not that much fun, or it's too quarter case. It's that kind of thing. And I feel sorry for my poor friend who is a 5e DM. He's been looking for other systems just because while he enjoys 5e, the kind of experience he wants, if he plays 5e, the players will rebel. But if they try a different system, they'll be okay with it. So,
is that because the players assume if they're playing 5th edition, they'll get a certain type of game? Because I see that's been mentioned in chat.
Well, how do I want to put this? It's because they know the rules so well. They feel that if they're playing that game, they have. How do I want to? But my best way of putting this is, the rules are in many cases a security blanket. It allows them to, and I'm going to say this is a semi-reformed power gamer, but you use it to protect yourself from bad decisions, and I don't think that is necessarily the best conducive environment for having fun and playing a game. How do I want to put that? If you feel the DM is being capricious and what we want to call the killer DMs, back in when we were young, then the rules are there to protect you from the DM.
Well,
if you're playing,
the flip side of that is, some people just like a proficiency in a game.
Yes.
Sean, for example, doesn't play a lot of different games because he's there.
Because I like the games that I like. Yeah. No.
Yeah, and I've got the one player in my 5e game. He's flat out said, I don't want to play with you guys if you guys switch games. Not because I don't want to play other games. I know this game. I don't want to learn another game. It's not that he has anything against other games. So I can see that there's some wiggle room there. I mean, yes, a lot of people are wanting to, I know this system now. I can min-max the crap out of it. But there's going to be some folks who are just like, this is what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, well, no, I agree with you on that aspect.
Yeah.
It's but there is that balance. Usually, and I'm going to put it this way, if you have faith in your dungeon master, that the rule system is usually less important. But with the era of people building their characters, to change rules upsets and how they're going to see the long-term progression of their character. So their character is less organic, and it's more of how do I want to put this? It's more of a video game, how I'm going to build them, rather than, hey, this is what's going in the rules, let's go this way. And there's a lot of that. And so that's where I always had problems trying to get them to try new systems, which kept things, if it was easy for them to learn, that was fine. But I found it was in many cases, perfect example, I want to talk about optional rules, long healing in 5e. My friend tried to do that and all of his players rebelled. Absolutely. And he's just like, but I want a little bit more action. And his point is that danger is part of the fun of the game, and they look at it as like, you're making us weaker. We can't do all the things we want to do, and so they refuse to break out of it. Whereas I think if he tried to, a perfect example is if he was trying to do a Warhammer Fantasy role play, they would be all into it because they know for a fact that, well, we already know it's a new system.
It's a gritty, dark, and dirty world. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, no, you're making 5e. You can't do that. And he's been looking for another game after the whole OGL stuff. And I've been trying to send him to different things, all over there. He's like, well, I like to try Pathfinder. I said, oh, try something completely different. And so I've been trying to get him on the Warhammer just because I know his wife and what she would like initially. But you're right. A lot of it is the familiarity. They don't want to have to learn a new system. It's complicated. And instead of just them, how do I want to say, just, it was much of it sounds bad, role-playing your characters and seeing what can go in there, it's like, well, how can I do the coolest attack, doing the most damage to maximize this? And it's, well, it's a bit different. So that's
there are people who play the game for that experience. Yes. And I have occasionally played with people like that, and I find them frustrating. But that's probably a topic for another stream, gatekeeping, kicking out those sort of players. But where was I going? House rules. I've been sat here trying to think of evolved house rules in games that I've run in recent years, ones that have come through things that have happened in a game, and I haven't got any that spring to mind.
They'll come to you once the stream is over.
Probably will. Probably. I mean, I tend to try and lay things out beforehand before we start and say, these are the rules I want to play with. And if anything is grey, I'll make an adjudication on the spot. But just let me make that adjudication. And
I hate DMs who introduce house rules on the fly in the middle of a game, especially ones that fundamentally change the game.
Yeah.
I if possibly, I like to have them laid out. I have booklets for my players in my games. Like, here you go. These are available to you. You can read them up.
I'm going to bring up another thing, though, is a lot of times is if you look at it as a cooperative experience, usually you'll start in I know I've done this. I can't think of any rules in specific, but instead taking the player side and saying, look, you did X. This is overpowering the game. It's reducing some of my fun. How about we change it like this? And you kind of negotiate that, and then they move the ruling, which doesn't affect them at that period of time, but it affects them for the next session, and you go from there. And that's how I think that most house rules organically form. Is you do that, you say, well, this is too weak. I agree with you. I have a perfect example of what is it? Is it True Strike or something where you have to cast a spell? That's the only thing you can get, and you get like 1 to 4 additional. 5e's one of the worst. Then that some of the cantrips or spells are terrible, and other ones are completely overpowered equivalently. And you really want to encourage, at least I always want to, encourage players to pick not the optimal stuff, but the things that will benefit in different aspects more than just, okay, I cast my cantrip, now I do nothing this time. And you kind of go, yeah, that's kind of crap. So that's where I feel about some of that.
I've heard the complaint about True Strike a lot, and people say, "Oh, I house rule, so it's a bonus." I think it's actually fine as is if you're considering from a point of view of not following up with a cantrip, but following up with one of your more rare spells. Like if you're going to target with a 3rd level spell slot, you want that advantage on that roll, right?
Well, for lower level, I'm going to mention that they're, let's talk about optionals. And 5e being one of them is the milestone. and people either play with sessions or milestones, and I'm not against those. In fact, sometimes I like them. It's just the people now treat those as that's the default rule, when in reality that is the optional rule.
Correct.
And I think that's
same with point by ability scores
Yes.
in 5th edition. The standard is 4d6 rearranged. That is what is listed as the main one in the book, with the others as optional. But yeah, there are some assumptions that people do get wrong about 5th edition. So yeah, a few more people have joined us in chat. So hello, Thomas Avon in disguise. Hello, Hungar. Nice to see you. I didn't think I said hello to Crafting Gamer either. Hello, Crafting Gamer. How are you doing? How are you doing, fellas? Right. So when it comes to applying or creating a house rule, how much do you think knowledge of other systems helps?
Immensely.
Oh yeah, I mean,
That is the correct
put
answer.
stuff in wholesale from other games.
Yeah.
sorry, I just found that funny with you guys saying that.
We've been talking about people,
Yeah.
5th edition players who won't accept other games. How do you get them to accept a rule from another game?
By telling them that 5th edition is already borrowed from so many other games.
That's another correct answer.
Talking to them.
Yeah, like just explain to them what the purpose of the rule is and where it comes from. Like fate points from the Warhammer system, it can just be translated into hero points. You get a reroll, you get to pass something, you get a bonus, you can do these things for it. Like, it's not groundbreaking. There's a point to it, especially if you turn the dial up by a lot, by a good chunk. You can make 5e games very deadly.
I'm gonna put out a hot take maybe for a lot of DMs, but if you actually spend some time dialoguing with your players, you might actually get a positive response rather than just trying to beat them over the head with a demand or a ruling, or some sort of tin pot dictator authoritarianism.
I think that's the big thing. I think that we all kind of agree on this point, which is if you're willing to talk to people, they're much more accepting of it.
But how often do you see DMs just saying, my way or the highway, and then they're like surprised when they can't ever, nobody that I don't know. I just I hear people like, I can't find players. Well, have you? Maybe it's a you problem.
Well, no. I mean, I agree with you on some of that, but I think that sometimes that's how do you end up being a forever DM is because you hate the guy on how he's DMing the current game, and so you run it yourself. Like, I can do a better job. I mean, that happens a lot. Is a lot of times it's like, well, I have this, and then you go, well, I like to play at some point, but again, like everything else, if you're willing to talk to people, which seems to be an anomaly in this day and age, and actually listen to what they have to say. Why do you like this rule? Why do you not like this rule? And I don't know. We're all DMs, and we all enjoy just talking rules. Sometimes it's hard to sit down and get players to sit down and say, okay, let's talk about the rules and how this impacts me as a dungeon master and how it impacts you as a character. And you sit down there and you actually say, yeah, okay, I can understand where you're coming from. And so, yeah, you're right. Don't abuse it. But my favorite is, I don't have to do a house rule if you don't abuse some certain things. You're like, oh, okay.
A lot of house rules just come out of constant rulings. I feel like anything that you're constantly making rulings on then kind of warrants a house rule.
Yeah.
So you're no longer having to do those spot rulings, and you're like, all right, this has come up for like the dozenth time, guys. Let's just agree how we're going to handle this and move forward.
I'm just the other part is there are a lot of optional rules out there written in the game books. It says you can do this. Just be aware that this is what's going to happen.
Hey, there's 5 editions of the game. Pick and choose the way they handled it that you like.
Yes.
I mean, throughout the many streams we've had here, we all more or less already agree that communicating with the players is a paramount thing. And it will not change. Communication is going to be key. I understand that if you've got if you don't like a certain system, but your group is saying, "Well, we really want to play this," then of course I can understand that you want to set the requirements for you being enticed to pick up the game that you don't want to normally run or that you're not enjoying, so that it becomes enjoyable. That makes sense. But then that's still back to the main point of you gotta communicate. I don't like this, but I will give it a go if we can do
Oh
that.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And then that's where most of it comes from. I mean, it's the same concept with the house ruling. If we're going to be making rules that are going to be changing a game, like we're just going to focus on Dungeons and Dragons for now, but this game's been tested. They have gone, well, it's been tested at least as much as they can be bothered to. It's not like they've sat down and given it over to people who are absolute weirdos and sit on different corners of the internet and hammer the numbers into Excel sheets and come back with the percentages of averages to hit. Now, they do some form of testing for the games. There's a point to why the rules are there. If you're going to be changing that around, go on.
We have a super chat from Bruce. I've not seen you on one of my streams before, Bruce. You are coming through one of the Simul streams by the looks of things, which
yeah, he's on mine. Thanks, Bruce.
Right.
First super chat from Mage's Musings.
Very good.
Oh, is that money going to you, Mage? Then
yeah, he paid through my end. Yeah.
Oh, right. So okay. Well, thanks for paying the Mage. Bruce. That's
he makes a
absolutely
great
marvelous.
point though, because how many times am I always talking about how my game was heavily influenced by Dragon? So
I can't imagine not having that. Is the funny part about all this. You're right. It makes such a big difference to do these things that I can't imagine not having house rules. But sometimes players just say, you know what, I would love if we had the ability to do X. You're like, well, we can do a house rule, and you're like, oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, you're bound in like the umpty billion years you play to get that guy who's like, what if I wanted to play a human who was raised by elves? Can I play that character, and can we do something different? And you're like, sure. It's not going to kill me. It's not going to end the world.
It's when the player says, "Can I have all the elven traits, the high dex and the sword bonus and the infravision?"
Well, yeah, and that's part of that discussion you have with them. It's like, sure, you're still physically human, so you don't get physical elf things. But if you want to go ahead and say that, whatever system you're using, whichever version you're using, that you have this instead of that, and we're going to swap in some stuff. Yeah, it's just having fun with your game. I
would say here. I mean, even though I'm going to go a bit back to the history. I mean, OD&D was a very incomplete rule set. Thanks, Thomas. Superb. Cheers, Thomas. OD&D was a very incomplete rule set, and Dragon Magazine first came out for the OSE days, and it almost solidified the fact that there were other options for DMs to try, and it pretty much, as if DMs, I don't think, thinking back in those days, DMs would have thought they needed permission to tweak their game, because OD&D was so incomplete, it was so bare bones in its style, that cheers, Bruce. Cheers, Bruce. Thank you.
It's not just that point, but wargamers as a whole were always doing that well before.
Of course, they were. Yeah.
So it stems from the very roots of D&D before D&D even existed.
Think about when you're a kid. Think about when you're kids and you're just out playing stupid games in the yard. I mean, how often did you all right, this time you've got to tag me twice for it to count, because it's too easy for you to tag me once. So,
you said, that's true. I mean, that's very true. I remember doing that.
Part of human nature.
And I was talking about OSE, but sorry about that, John. You're making
looking back to the AD&D First Edition Dungeon Master's Guide, it feels like in places that it was a collection of Gygax's notes more than anything, because it's infamous in its layout issues, inconsistencies, but also how inspiring it is. And D&D in the early days was simply an evolving game, evolving from the house rules of those who ended up writing it. So the game we know and love is just, it's a collection of house rules essentially. And I think that personally, a lot of the soul has gone from D&D as a game overall because it's become so formalized in the way it's written, in the way the rules are written.
No,
They've
really tried to write the right consistency into it over time. I mean, and with the intention being good, but you're right. I mean, it that flavor, this individual seasoning blend that we all have called house rules.
Yeah. I think that's changed the expectation from players that they're going to play with house rules. Because certainly back in the day, in the late 70s, early 80s for some of us, and probably 5 years ago for Doof, because he's a lot younger, we didn't have the internet as a definitive source of how things were played. So house ruling was the norm. I've seen comments in chat that no two DMs ever run AD&D exactly the same. There's so many vagaries, and yes, it was a tournament. As Bruce says, it's a tournament version, but still there are vagaries in the rules that put it down to DM's interpretation in a lot of cases, which is essentially a house rule.
Yeah, I mean, and they're even endorsed from the very beginning in the rules. They talk about make your table your own,
Absolutely.
if you want to do something. So it's always been a very DIY hobby. So
absolutely. And
some of us were so unclear from the beginning that our games are just a bunch of house rules anyways, because we didn't understand how the rules worked in the first place. And by the time we did, we're like, but that's not how I play it. It's like,
yeah. So let's go around the table now. The house rule that you are most proud of that you've come up with in your games over the years. Whatever game, whatever the rule.
Well, the one that's proving, I don't know if it's the most, but that's proving really effective and the players love is I made a slight tweak to the monk in first edition where I made it so they get the mook rule for the fighter, right? So one attack per level of experience against less than full hit die. And they are effectively natural armor against weapon types because I use weapon types religiously. And it's amazing how that little slight shift, very easy to implement, elevated the monk just that one notch higher. And the player, well, we've had two now players running the monks. They're just loving it, especially when he got surrounded by kobolds and say, oh, wait, I get 4 attacks per round now, right? Now he felt like the martial artist wading into combat. Even though that's not the optimal option for the first ed monk, he still had that moment where he was able to do it. So that one's a recent one that I came up with that's proving very popular and effective. But it ties back to existing rules. Yeah.
Okay, so because you're using the weapons versus armor class table, the monk's open hand attack is at a huge disadvantage against a lot of enemies immediately.
If they're in heavy armor or lightly armored enemies, the monk is at an advantage. Leather armor. Sorry,
they always were wizard slayers, though, weren't they? That was
against a wizard. They moved an unarmed wizard. He's +4 to strike unarmed. So
wizard killers and grapplers.
And grapplers
using the unarmed combat.
That's true.
By the book or even ported, they are absolutely. They're amazing grapplers. And then once a monk figures out that, hey, if I just grapple this guy in heavy armor, I'm going to win every time.
I'm gonna have to add that the monk, as written, does not seem as bad if you see it as a thief subclass.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to tell players that don't think of yourself as Bruce Lee. Not at first level. You got to get to around level 7 or 8 before you can start participating in frontline combat.
Get yourself a spear and stand behind the big guys initially, or fling things in, or or skulk around and do some thievery.
Yeah.
Kwai Chang Kane or a ninja or something, you know.
Well, if you even watch Kung Fu, Kwai Chang Kang usually uses avoidance and keeps his distance until he can get in for devastating strike. And if you're using the segmented system for surprise properly in first edition, monks are really nasty because you can get those segments of surprise by hiding and using your thieving skills and then launching a devastating strike with multiple attacks while the person is surprised.
Yeah.
And that's not a host roll. That's by the book.
Elfbait, we have a direct question for you.
Yeah, it came through my stream, my simul stream of it. Yes and no. I mean, when we were kids, we had our own little home system that we would use to convert our favorite after school and Saturday cartoons into game systems. And that was really just a simplistic system that we used as a mechanic and an excuse to draw characters. Existing systems, using existing systems just to have fun and to run other games all the time. You know, homebrewed a whole Aliens RPG out of the Star Wars West End D6 system back in the 80s. Done it with other things. More so with miniatures games. And yes, this whole panel could probably create their own game, although it would be a nightmarish mess of favorites.
It would have to have spreadsheets for Saxius.
It'd be an RPG of nothing but everybody's darlings, and then we'd have to like simultaneously bring them all to the slaughter.
Yeah, I'll just create my own game.
It's called Dungeons and Dragons, and it's wholly original.
Dungeons and Dragons and Geeks. I actually did years ago think about making my own retro clone, and then I just saw how pervasive, how flooded the market is. Forget it. I'd rather just create a supplement at this point that goes with a specific game.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we could all get together to do that. I know we have talked about writing adventures, though finding the time and organizing is difficult. So, Saxius, any house rules that you've come up with that you are proud of?
None that I can think of at the moment, because I've been going over the many years. I've just gone through so many different groups to rules come and go. None of them has really sort of like stuck from group to group and like been a consistency. Like they change all the time depending on what the group wants and needs. So I can't say that there's been one that's been sticking from the very beginning till the very end. So I'm gonna have to say no.
We've already heard Doof, your main house, your only regular house.
That is my only house rule, pretty much.
And basically, so a player can have as many characters as they've got their highest level character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. The only issue I'd have that with our OSE games that we play is that we've got sort of 3 games running concurrently. So most people have got 2 or 3 characters depending on which games they're playing in. A few people bring the same character to each one. That's why they've zipped through the levels. I haven't done that. I've got separate characters in the 2 games I'm playing, Gingerbeards and Istilars. And I think because Istilar, Gene from Inksplat, who often joins in on Fridays, he's reached 3rd level despite having the most characters die in that game. Because I think he managed to sneak his thief into multiple DM's games to get a bit of extra XP along the way. That's absolutely fine. I can see the idea about focusing on one character, and once you've got that one character to level 2, then you can start experimenting with more characters, and it helps build up that whole portfolio of characters idea that is really old school AD&D. Players are expected to have portfolios of characters. Eli, any house rules that you've come up with that you really
kind of in a similar boat to Oscar there. I mean, I don't like keep them cataloged very well. There's so many games here and there, and I've also been such a loose GM for systems in the past. It's hard to know where the house rules fights end and the real game begins. I tend to do a lot of rulings on the spot.
That describes me nowadays, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes in the most, I wouldn't say it's like my favorite or the best, but it's the one that's consistent, is allowing flanking in 5e where there isn't flanking, because I want my players to think a little bit more tactically in combat.
There is an optional rule for flanking, though, isn't there, in 5e?
There may be, but I
Because
don't think I like it.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, so if I recall, the flanking optional rule for 5e completely breaks with the rest of 5e in that it's a solid plus X number of points bonus, and we just play it like you have advantage if you can if you're flanking. Yeah, it's neither here nor there, and the monsters get it too, and there's more of them than there are of you. So, I mean, historically, I mean, one of the ones I used forever back starting with 2nd edition is all the characters in my campaigns rolled on this giant D100 backgrounds table. It was like, and it was just a list of things that would make your character slightly unique. An inheritance, so you would start with extra money. An heirloom sword, so you might have a first level character with a +1 weapon or something like that. Just weird little things that didn't break the bank, but you had a title. You had land. It generated X number of gold a month as long as you were able to visit it. Just little things that would allow characters, like let's say I had a party with 3 fighters, it would allow each of them to have something that was different about them from the other fighter, other than just their equipment choices and stuff, or their kits back then. But that was one I used for the longest time. But right now, there's nothing that really sings out to me about the game. Drinking a potion is a bonus action instead of an actual action. So,
I know you play in a number of games. Any house rules you've come up with as a DM or GM at all?
I'm gonna, we're talking about coming up with, and then we talked about other systems. Perfect is I like clocks in Blades, Blades of the Dark, because it doesn't do a binary success or failure. And in D&D or these other games, a lot of times you roll, you succeed. Oh, you exceed. You rolled so high. And instead, I'd rather do a clock. One is it creates it creates tension among players because they can see this clock. So it's like, oh, you're sneaking around and you have a guard alert or something. You can even put that up there and they know what it is. And as it starts filling up, they can feel that stress starting to come out. And then they're like, oh, well, we better start moving. So it can kind of force players to start moving in directions, where they feel a little bit more stressed, that where in most cases they really wouldn't. And that's one of the things that I like myself about that. So I like the clocks that they use myself. I think it's an easy system. It's easy for players to understand.
I gotta take off.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Sorry,
Cheers,
See you, Eli.
Eli. So that's where I take, and I think it's a great thing. And I know Oscar mentioned it. Fate points are really nice if you want a more dangerous game. I think that's really good, especially for a 1st edition D&D. Like, look, you're gonna get that. Other ones that we're going into, if we're gonna play OSC, by God, we're going to play with encumbrance, and we're going to play with we're going to play with variable weapon damage depending on weapon type.
Darn tootin'.
I mean, technically, those are all optional rules that people take as default.
One thing I like about OSC is it does present a number of very sensible, very simple optional rules that you can take or leave, and you don't break your game by taking them, and you don't break your game by leaving them. It's very nice in that sense.
So that's where I look at that. It's not everything has to be perfect, but that to me works out really well for players to say, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to use. I've
already mentioned my pages of house rules for 5th edition, but my favorite one on those pages, and I don't want to harp about 5th edition too much, but my favorite one of those pages was an attempt to make undead more fearsome again. I didn't bring in level drain. Instead, what I said was I kept the 5th edition hit point drain, but they didn't recover the lost hit. They could never recover the lost hit points without a restoration spell, unless the precise undead that had drained them had been killed.
And see, I like that. I like that stuff because that's a very traditional. And like I said, sometimes as a player, you're like, yeah, that's really cool. I agree with that one. And that's how I feel about that about the level.
So the play, if you've been
especially
drained by an undead, you had to hunt that particular wight down and make sure it's undead, that you put an end to it, and only then could you start to recover the bit of your soul that it had taken.
and that makes it so. But that also creates, especially for those intelligent undead, which are normally your vampires.
Yes,
it makes it. We have to go take this out. It encourages players to do the to have nemesis or for that, and that's so. Yeah, I agree with a lot of this stuff. I don't like it where everyone's like, oh, it's good or bad. It's like, well, it depends on the kind of feel you want for your game, and it can be great for it or it can be terrible depending on how it's implemented, like most things.
Right. So to spin this round. What is the worst house rule that you've ever come up with, or any DM has attempted to thrust upon you?
I hate critical fumble rules. Have I mentioned I hate critical fumble rules?
Really?
In case you didn't hear at the back, I hate critical fumble rules.
I'm going to clarify that with in games that aren't designed for them.
Yes. Same with critical hit rules. I mean, I'm a little more forgiving of those, but I still prefer. I don't mind them if the system is designed around them. But yeah, I hate when they're shoehorned into a system that's not designed for it. People keep talking about, they're playing OSE or first at D&D, and yeah, we use critical hits. You do double damage. And I'm like, great, well, that's so lethal, and the game's already stacked against the players if you don't know what you're doing, and now you just want to make it worse because you will be critical more than you will hit critically.
Absolutely.
Unless you're a monk, apparently fighting kobolds.
I think in one of the games I ran, this was in 3rd edition, we weren't really sure how the number of pages were meant to be used. So for the wizard, that is. And I ended up basically saying that, okay, well, there is no limit for how many spells you can have as a wizard, so you can just have multiple books. And that became a thing that some players would then say, right, well, this sounds logical. And then they would then try and port that over into other games. So when I tried to run 2nd edition, where, again, I thought, well, I already ruled this in a previous edition of D&D, why wouldn't that work in 2nd edition or in 1st edition? Just a wizard with multiple books with an almost limitless number of spells that they could know. Not exactly a good house rule, in my opinion, which is later down the road. I pretty much just took it out and said, no, we're not using this anymore.
I'm going to bring up the other part, like you're saying with spells, is you memorize. You have spell slots, but you don't really memorize the individual spell, so you can use what's there. And I understand why it was done in the 1st edition, but I also never liked. Why would I know this spell and not forget everything? And yes, I've heard about Jack Van, and I've read the Dying Earth stuff, and I realized yes, but those were all warriors that had those spells. So, but I mean, I know a lot of people like that pre-preparation, but to me, that's great if you have enough players. When you have a lot less magic users, I like them to be able to use those utility spells rather than just go all combat or something else. I want them to be able to be a jack of all trades when they need to be there.
So, Doof, any house rules in games that you've played in? So you've already said you only made one house rule. That you
played 5e with 3d6 down the line, long like week-long long rests. I think, and other horrible house rules that are not good for a 5th edition.
And did just turn the game into a horrible grind.
Oh yeah.
Is that so bad though? In certain cases, well, I guess it depends on the type of game you're looking for. Because
if you're looking for a bad game, it's perfect for you.
Well,
like it just removes a lot of the interactivity of the game, giving you way less options as a player. So you just sit around waiting a lot of the time, and with 3d6 down the line, the correct option is not to play or to pull up a new character a lot of the time.
I think my worst house rule, and I'm going back to when I was in my teens, and I just let anything go pretty much. And I remember deciding I've only got a few players, so I'm going to get rid of class level limits playing 1st edition, and I gave out far too much stuff, and I ended up with a party who were just utterly invincible, all manner of demi-humans at stupidly high levels, and it just ceased to become fun. I think it might be fun for them, but it wasn't fun for me. Include like a 12-14 mage cleric, elf mage cleric, that was just an absolute juggernaut. There was an elven cavalier level 14 riding a key rin and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I mean, people might enjoy that sort of game, but these players just wanted to go god and demon slaying at that point. I ceased to be interested in it very quickly. That's probably my biggest flop, but I was 15 at the time, so I can be excused that.
Well, I think that's true of a lot of us, though, John. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know about Oscar there, but that was. I actually did it where it got so bad. I actually put a level limit where there wasn't one in AD&D. I said no character above 40th level, and that's when I found out that monsters could. Oh, you get XP for gold? Oh my God! I mean, when you play every day, within about 200 days, your characters can get up pretty high level very quickly.
Yeah. No, I did. I know one of the games I was in, that was like Monday to Sunday, every weekend of the year. And even like sometimes during the lunch times. Yeah, that got a bit out of hand. But
yeah, I mean that was just silliness. It was as you would in America you would say a Monty Hall. I'd never heard of Monty Hall until.
Let's make a deal.
Yeah, that didn't exist over this side of the Atlantic. So, but yeah, I was that sort of DM when I was 15. And you're right, Mage. Gold is there to be wasted. I've just seen that comic book. Yep. So the purpose of house rules. How far are you willing to go with a system before you decide to throw it away and come up with and do something else? House ruling wise, how many house rules is too many?
I don't have a hard limit that I can pinpoint. I just kind of feel it, It's like because house rules have this habit of breeding,
Yes.
and you have to know when to sort of stop and say, okay, this is too much. So yeah, I just kind of follow my gut. If it becomes too unwieldy, you've definitely gone too far. House rules ideally will be intuitive. Sorry, Oscar.
No, I was just going to say, like, for me, it's at what point do you lose sight of the actual core system? So, house rules are meant to be add-ons, in my opinion. Like, it's a building block. But if it gets to the point of where you're covering up the thing that you're supposed to be using, well, at that point, you're not using the core system. Like, that's been drowned out in other things, so it's been almost reworked entirely. So if the core structure is being changed so radically that you're no longer actually playing the core game, well, at that point, like, what are you playing? Like, should you move over to something else, or is this now a new breed of a role-playing game that you're playing? That's where I stand with it.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's how far, have you diluted the point of playing the original game? I use house rules for two specific reasons. One, to flesh out rules that aren't quite tight, and two, to flavor my game. My fifth ed system my fifth ed set of house rules is the perfect example of that, because fifth ed is a tight enough system mechanically. So the rules I've added in are to give it a different flavor, a different type of, like to move away from the superhero and back to the more OSR vulnerability, while still keeping within the framework of what makes it 5th edition.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that because your players don't want to play other games, don't want to learn other games, or I can't remember whether you've said that before. I mean, well, would they not play OSE, or do you just not want to run OSE for that group?
Well, all of my players are like, there's a lot of crossover. So in the case of my 5th edition game, they all came on board because it was an experiment. I was creating these house rules and I wanted to test it. But the other part of my 5th ed game specifically was it was remote. It's online because I had a player in LA, I had a player in Oklahoma, somebody in Detroit. Nobody was local. The player base is now shifted, so only the Oklahoma and LA player are still active in the game, but everybody else is local, and they're also in my 1st ed game. So things have gotten shifted around, but no, they're all in for whatever. So it really depends. Even my LA player, she used to be here in Toronto before she moved out to LA and was part of my AD&D game.
I guess we've reached Doof's bedtime. Remember, he's an hour ahead of us. So cheers for popping on, Doof. It's nearly midnight where you are now, isn't it? So you're in the dark and desolate Sweden, I believe.
Very dark and very desolate.
It's actually like there's a reason I left Northern Europe. No,
We leave the Swedes to their confined places, walled in and left behind, the darkness. Not even the sun will shine there.
Yes, yeah. I mean, when I did my house rule in a 5th edition, it wasn't intended to be a test game. It was intended to be a game to keep everyone occupied during times when we couldn't meet up. But I guess it probably was a test because it was the first time I'd done such a severe hack to 5th edition. And I'll hold my hands up now and say, I like 5th edition at 1st and 2nd level. I think it's fine as is at 1st and 2nd level, but it goes wrong after that. And my rules were to try and slow down the development to make it more, make the players have to think more, make them have to manage their resources a lot more, to force mages to occasionally reach for weapons and run out of spells, not have eternal cantrips, to think about weapon and armor maintenance, and just to tone down a few items, and a few other bits and bobs to do with resting and stuff. But still, when we got to level 5 or 6, I had to hold my hand up and accept the game was still going to an area that I didn't want to go, in terms of superhero feel. And that was the point where I gave up. I added quite a few quite extensive house rules in there, in terms of multi-class limitations and race and class limitations and alignment limitations as well. A completely revised weapons and armor list with some certain weapons that didn't fit the era removed and certain armor types removed and renamed and all that sort of stuff. And ultimately, I guess it didn't. I mean, I know my players were enjoying it, but in the end, I still fell out with 5th edition. It didn't work for me. So ultimately, it failed. And I'd have had to house rule further. At which point, I was like, nah, no more. And then WotC pulled all their silly things that they've done, and I was like, I don't feel any sense of regret now. But there are games that I don't feel we'll ever need codified house rules. I would say, for example, I've never even thought about bringing in a house rule for Call of Cthulhu because I run it but I run it in my own style. You could argue that my style is a house rule as such, in that I don't follow a lot of a number of the rules in the books. I just run it very free and easy. And I think it might have been Elle who mentioned earlier that where was it? And this is generally my approach. Let's call house rules what they are. Rule 0, which is when the game doesn't provide for all things, because no game can, the DM makes it up so you can continue playing. I make up when I run Call of Cthulhu, I make up loads of it. And I've never codified any of it. I wouldn't class. Do you have to codify something for it to be a house rule? Do you have to come to some agreement?
It helps.
Yeah.
It helps to have it for reference.
Well, you've got to have like. I think again to work on what Sean said, you've got to at least be upfront about what's happening, so that the players are able to at least buy in and understand what's happening. There's got to be some form of agreement to what is being enforced here. If you're not voicing out that this is now a new ruling or a new thing, and it's just like, no, this is how it's going to be from now on. It's like, well, that's not going to go down well. We're going to have to fall back to the communication discussion that we had. But having it on writing is just an easier way for everyone to turn back and say, well, we agreed on this. And then that's just, it's much like having the rules in the core book. It's right there for everyone to just defer back to it. So then evening the playing field, and you won't have to rely on the one player in the group that sits there and it's just an encyclopedia of all the rules that memorizes more of them than the DM themselves.
I mean, I've mentioned it before. I mean, I guess it helps with me that I don't tend, certainly with that particular group that I ran all these house rules for, most of them don't sit and digest rule systems. They just play their characters. And when I ran Call of Cthulhu for them, I think one of them knows some of the rules. The others just played and just rolled dice when I told them to. And that's how I liked it.
I'm to be honest, John, I have the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition book. I don't open it up to actually read and how the rules work. I'm just like, okay, what do I need, John? Just let me know. What's the difficulty? And that's why I'm trying to say is, sometimes you need that codification for the player that wants everything. And then sometimes, like for myself, like, I just don't, I'm here to play a game, and I really don't care what system it is. And I don't care which system you borrow from, as long as it helps enhance the game.
Oh, we lose. Omanal keeps dropping out.
Sorry about
you're
that.
back.
I don't know what's going
You're
on.
back.
Okay. But the point is after a while, you don't care what the system is. You just want to play the game, and you're going to act organically on how your character is based in this setting.
Yes.
And if you do so, then the rules are less important. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that a lot of times rules do help reinforce things. But I do that's why I don't have any problems with bastardizing rules anywhere. Usually it just comes down to, are we playing the rule right? And the other part is after the game is over, you go, hey, you called the rule wrong. It's like this. And he goes, you know what? I don't like that. We're going to change the rule. Okay, fine. I'll just put my little memory bank of, okay, this rule's been changed from now on. It usually is, how do I want to put this? It's usually against the player for how the rule, the DM made a ruling on the spot because you feel like looking it up. And then you go, that's not how it's supposed to work. Like, oh, oops, I made a mistake. Okay, well, we'll just keep it as it is from now on. Okay, that sounds good.
I mean, one example of from when I was running Orient Express for my group, they got into a car chase, and there are chase rules in 7th edition Call of Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
The way I ran that car chase, I completely ignored all of those, and we had a really good fun scene of them attempting to turn these old jalopies round quickly in the road and putting their foot down, and me describing them going from 0 to 60 in about 40 seconds, and screeching around corners on very poor tires with bad grip and all that sort of stuff. And I broke that chase scene down into a series of drive auto rolls contested with a few dexterity checks here and there and a few luck rolls, and just narrated it from that. And it turned out absolutely fine. I was using the core mechanics of the game, but not the chase rules that are in there. I guess I made up a house ruling on the spot, because I think there's a difference between a house rule and a house ruling. But if we had another chase scene, I'd have done it the same way. So I'd probably set a precedent of a house rule there for that group in terms of chases.
I'm going to bring up something that's way outside of what most of us do, but the Jordan Pearson went over that generally you create. Kids will play a game and they inherently know the rules, and it's only codified whenever it needs to be clarified, and that's the way we all act, oddly enough. And I thought that was very interesting. I thought that it just applied to how we do our stuff, so that's why I was mentioning it.
And Elle's come up with some decent questions tonight. Odd question: is codifying house rules needed when playing it with a steady group versus transient players?
It's always good to have them for reference in any case.
Well, yeah. In my experience, like especially if I am with a group that is brand new and I've had to pick them again from the internet and just make a brand new group and then just sort of go from there, I will, of course, verbally codify it, but it won't be till much later down if it's people that I actually know, that I will then sit down and do here's a codified thing, because my experience with online games and with brand new groups that not all of them last past the 6 to 8 month mark. So
right.
In my experience, there's such a high turnover, at least for the online games, that if you set up brand new games, making these house rules, yeah, it's great, but you're not guaranteed that you're going to have a game till after the 8 point mark. At that point, there are so many lives, there are so many people who's just got events in their lives that just say, well, I want to bow out, or I will need to do this, or the winter season typically is the time where people sort of turn around and go, well, I was having fun, yeah, but I don't want to dedicate it, so they just sort of just disappear.
See, that surprises me. I'd have thought the winter time would have been the best time for certainly for online groups.
Because you are spending time with your family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've seen groups disappear because the winter time comes around. A lot of people say, or at least I know in the United States, you then suddenly have what's it called? Thanksgiving is coming around. You've got events taking place. You've got I've got to again, America's a huge place, so I've got to travel 4 hours over here to go and see members of my family. It's like, okay, well, to me that's quite a big commitment, so I'm not going to start saying, oh, you've now got to find a corner in this house and play the games. Like, no. So yeah, that's
I mean, I would say that if you're playing with a steady group and you have common rulings, I don't always feel the need to codify them, because as long as you're consistent and the group sort of remembers the rulings that come up often, you don't need to really codify them. But yeah, if you've got transient players, people who drop in and drop out, it is more important to have the house rules that you like in your game presented to new players who are dropping in, dropping out, who are not as familiar with your style. Because I mean, I think a lot of house rules come directly from DMing style and group play style. They stem from how a group approaches a game.
That's fair.
Okay. So
Elle hears the dinging. That's not the ding, it's my phone. My sister is messaging me constantly. Apparently I agreed to go up to her place this weekend to help with some yard work, and I don't remember it, so now it conflicts with my game. So family drama.
Well, that the next OSR friends, most of the early games, whether it's Palladium or other stuff, are just house rules that became so different and a different experience that they just went back and said, okay, this game isn't doing it for me, and the rules have changed enough that it's worth me making a whole new game out of it. and I'm okay with that. It's I don't know, but sometimes it seems like everyone's like, you have to play this one way or you will be banned forever. And why? It's just everything needs to have more fun.
I've encountered those sort of people. The one way of playing, who think they've found the holy grail of gaming, and everything else is wrong.
I always joke, tell everyone, you're playing the game wrong. And really, what you're playing wrong. You're playing the game wrong. Well, I put in my own spin. You're playing the game wrong.
Yeah, I've met them too. They're interesting. Collection.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, because I've asked them to explain how to play it, and I've been told that apparently I'm not clever enough to read the rules. I'm like, okay, well, if you aren't smart enough to explain it to me, then clearly you don't understand it well enough.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the other part too. Is when we're talking about house rules, and we can bring stuff in and like, why do we do this? Like, I don't like a lot of the binary systems. So to me, a clock makes sense. You bring it in. If it doesn't work, you toss it. And sometimes, even if you put a house rule and it works for a certain period of time and doesn't work later on, you toss it. To me, rules should be like toilet paper. You use them when necessary, and then you get rid of it when it's no longer working.
Right. And how many sort of the editions of games, how many games get revised because of persistent house rules creeping in? Let's say one of the most we go back to a very, very common house rule from AD&D, and I remember we didn't know what a composite bow was, and we just assumed, and I guess a lot of people did, that this composite bow, because it was more expensive, was just this bow that was specially made for warrior types, so they could add their strength bonus, because it was just sort of skipped over in the rules that there might be bows that exist that are of really high quality, where fighters can fight, strong characters can benefit from their strength when firing, and we assumed that would be composite bows. And when wasn't it the SSI Gold Box games, which were based largely on 1E AD&D? Didn't composite bows in that have a strength bonus to them? Hadn't it already become like the most almost canonical house rule by that point?
Well, using that as specifically because when I had to look up what a composite bow was, I would then be given the whole like levers and machinations.
That's a compound bow. A composite bow is a different thing.
But this was me having to just look up what it was so I could see what the picture was, and this is what Google would then give me. And then that would then tell me, it's like, oh, so that's the kind of bow where you have to have extraordinary strength, but you can then do X, Y, and Z. That then led me down that rabbit hole, and that just, I wasn't the only one. A lot of people. No,
well, I mean, there were a lot. I mean, it was so common that it was in various D&D computer games as the rule.
I'm talking on behalf of like all the people who didn't speak English as their first language. They did exactly the same what I did, and it's just like, oh, we all came to that conclusion because our understanding of the language was based on the specific words. We didn't exactly understand the description of it, but then when we looked it up, we would see this, and we understood that bow, the composite or compound bow, which was wrongly searched, was technically a more stronger one. So it was just how that
right
misunderstood.
I use that rule where I mean, whether or not it's a rule or a house rule, that's for me, that is the distinction in my 1E game. The composite bow is the one that is capable of being tensed to the higher strength characters. You know, you can argue that it's not realistic or it's not how they work. It's like, yeah, it's how it works in my game world.
Okay. I'm going to bring in another thing. Is the other part that most people forgot was it specifically said that if you get a strength bonus with that with the bow, it's supposed to be a multiplier of the cost of the longbow.
Right. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly what it do. Every plus that you gain is the cost of the bow over again. So if you have if you're tensing it to 18,100 Well, that's going to be a very pricey bow, but usually affordable to a higher level character.
True. At that point, it's well worth it. Yeah, but I just wanted to mention that because everyone thinks one way. It's like, well, that's not technically what it says in certain cases, and so yeah, it's definitely. I'm trying to think of what other. I mean, we all have different rules for things. But I think that also the players were screaming for stuff, and in retrospect, really the big thing for a game is to learn to say no. And sometimes when we talk about house rules, the other part of the house rules are rules that we ignore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. My house rule when I run AD&D is I use supplies and initiative from basic because it just runs faster, and I can't be bothered with all the messing about.
Exactly, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, I mean that's a constant house rule when I run AD&D because I have tried to run. Oh, is that a train nearby?
That's a train outside of my window.
Okay.
Don't know why they're honking. No, normally they don't blare their horns.
Where was I?
Trains.
Trains. Yes,
It's been
Put off-
derailed. Anyway,
I've been derailed.
Yes.
Yes.
But I appreciate the pen though.
But I mean, obviously, crossbows mentioned. If you double, I mean, I think it's fair to double the base damage of crossbows because crossbows are so heavily nerfed in first edition.
AD&D, yeah.
AD&D, they are slow. Their damage isn't great. They've got no real. I think they even got a range advantage. I don't think they have over.
Yeah,
over
they
longbow.
do have good range, but a longbow still trumps the light crossbow.
I think
Yeah.
I've ruled in my second edition that crossbows you don't require any combat skills for it. It's something I would rather have. Everyone can pick it up and use it. They can maintain it, but it's such a simple weapon that you can almost hand it to a peasant and just go like point and roast.
That was their advantage in real life, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As much as anything.
Yeah, but you needed someone who was competent in maintaining it. So for something like that, yeah, like I ruled that I would give out crossbows and I would make it a stable defense line for almost every city. It's like we will just deploy 100 peasants with 25 people behind them just reloading crossbows, and then just becomes like this conveyor belt of consistently firing at you that way. Although it would burn through ammunitions, but that was the whole point of what I would go by.
And the composite bow rule, adding a strength composite bow, even further nerfs the crossbow, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, but
But you have to have the strength.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
for the
true.
composite, like that's a two-edged thing. Like one, you have to first and foremost be able to have you have to be a fighter first and foremost. You then have to have you have to have 18 strength, and then you have to roll a somewhat decent percentile strength from there, just to justify going down that route. So that already makes that a less traveled route, purely because of the statistics involved. And then when you start looking at the longbows, well, again, if you're going to start getting into the immediate things like, oh, you're going to be using longbows in the middle of a dungeon, probably not. A crossbow is probably going to be a lot more easier to maneuver around, but depends on like how your DM is going to be using space and distances as well as crampedness. That's down for the individual game at that point. I do a lot of open land exploration, which makes it a lot more viable to have all of these various things. But for the more tactically inclined, there's a big advantage for having a crossbow in an enclosed space, and especially if you can then go out of your way to then get the crossbow enchanted to reload itself. Ooh, what a horrifying idea!
Well, and I think that like you said, and this is what people forget, is generally bowmen took years, crossbowmen took weeks. And that's something that, to be fair, is when you start looking at D&D, the assumption is that you're going to be competent characters, whether even at first level, is you've had enough of that training. I mean, what is a first level character? It's considered a veteran. So it's not even his first, time out. And I think that sometimes that's what players forget. Well, this isn't as good. That's true, but there are other aspects too, which is you have to look at how fast can they do it. And I thought this was interesting. Shooting downwards, there's a major disadvantage in reality for firing that versus a crossbow, which is where crossbows really excelled in defense of castles because they could easily shoot downwards because you can get the leverage. You can't get the same leverage if you're not generally pulling it back. You don't get the right muscles and stuff. And that's not something that we normally, as DMs for the most part, or whenever we play games, really model. But that's something that's used in real life that it's like, well, where will this fit in? Where will that fit in? So I think that there's that. The other part is crossbows you don't have to have a lot of maneuverability that you would with a bow. How is it impacting you? Does it, how far can you move back? If you really want to start putting in armor and say, you only get strength bonus if you're using light armor. That's a big difference. And, there's a house rule that you can do. And then players like, well, do I want my character to be lightly armored or not? And that's, I like where players are forced to make choices in that cases, but yeah.
Okay. So this is one topic I haven't actually written any notes down for this stream because I was out. So things are coming to me as I remember them. I was thinking them all up in my car journeys earlier. And this is one thing I just popped back into my head. It seems to me the idea of house ruling has become less popular with each edition of D&D. And certainly through first, second, then to third. I don't have so much experience. I know very little experience with fourth and fifth edition, because it's got that single mechanic. Everything's based around the D20. You do have a lot of knock-on effects. If you change something in one part of the game, you might have an unintended effect in another part of the game. Is house ruling generally more accepted in AD&D and early versions of D&D because it's a more modular system where you've got 4 or 5 different subsystems working together to form a game, and it's easier to tinker around the edges?
I think it was more expected even for AD&D and old school because the rules weren't as fleshed out. You had to.
But that's
as you said, every table played differently.
But I'm saying because also you've got different bits of the game that all work with different little systems to form one game. Combat is separate to thieves' skills. It's a totally different mechanic. Whereas in 5th edition, it's still all done on a D20.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I'd find, at least to my basic understanding, with at least the new editions, is that a lot of DMs are trying to make their games unique in their own way, which is often done via house ruling. So they will go out to sort of like create the rules that will implement the right setting or the right mechanics to suit their style and the world that they want to have the players be immersed in. So I'm finding that at least from my limited discussions, I will have to be honest on that, like the 5th edition games that I hear and read and see, they are very much house ruled to begin with. Like it's like this the standard cookie cutter Forgotten Realms D&D game really isn't one that I hear a lot of these days. There's always something different, something unique, some tinkering that seems to be the norm that I'm finding in 5th edition. Now, whether they're good or bad, that's not for me to say. It's just that I don't hear normal, like, stock standard D&D games. There's always something different about them.
I'm going to bring this up, is I think that if you look at all of the different games that are out there, I think that in reality is that 5th edition is probably the most house ruled when you think about it, because a perfect example is, not that I have it, because they include settings, but let's look at all the 5e knockoffs, the One Ring, the Iron Kingdoms, all of these others that are out there, they've used it, and then they've modified that system to make it They did the same thing with third edition too. They've made it kind of into a Frankenstein thing, and you're just like, hey, and I don't have any problems with it. I think it's great, but it's the basic stuff that we talk about with D&D. I think sometimes we look at only what WotC produces, ignoring all the third-party stuff out there that does do all of the house rules per se, except it's not in a book. And that's why, Pugmire and all these others that you wouldn't think of being in there, they're like, oh yeah, this is 5th edition. It uses 5th edition adjacent rules, and 3rd edition did it very similar as well. So, yeah, that's that. So I don't see it as necessarily, the same way that I guess everyone else is looking at it in that aspect. But I think that it's actually it's a good thing because it keeps the game fresh where you wouldn't have it before. At least the way I look at it.
Anyway, I'll have to dip here. It was a good session, everyone.
Thank you, Sextus.
See you later.
See you.
So if anyone else does wish to join us for the last hour or so of the stream, the link is in the Discord. I'm gonna say, when I first started thinking about house ruling 5th edition, I put some of my ideas across in various places online, and I got a hell of a lot of pushback because people would. It was almost as if, like, who are you to think you can change the game? That was the attitude I got from a lot of people. Bugger off and play something else. That was the attitude, and eventually that's what I've done. So, they might have been right in the end. But yes, Daniel, you can jump in, Daniel. No problem at all. And yeah, I mean, if you his bear as well. So I mean, you can have a wash, Christopher. I mean, you just come in from outside. Have a wash and join us if you want. You don't need to be presentable on my stream. I got home, turned on my computer, went and grabbed some dinner, and was straight back up to the computer. And I hadn't been in the house since 8:30 this morning, which was the link's in the Discord. Daniel, I've put it in the Discord. So if you go into the Discord into stream invites, it's in there. But I got such a pushback, and it was such an odd. What I felt coming from older D&D, such an odd attitude, because I was used to the idea of house ruling, of tweaking, of making the game my own. And when I talked about that on various places on the internet, the general attitude was, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't you dare do that." And it was like, well. all I wanted was a bit of feedback as to how you think this would work, rather than just mudslinging. I do, Christopher. I do. How are you doing, Bear? How are you doing?
I'm a horse in the throat, but you know.
But if you've got a horse,
he's a bear horse hybrid.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, if you've got a horse shoved down your throat, then you're going to sound weird.
I don't know why she swallowed the fly. I guess she'll die.
Daniel's joining us as well. Here's Daniel as well. Otherwise known as Guns Are Cool. So we'll go to Bear. Your attitude towards house rules and how many you use, how you employ them. Just give us a rundown.
I love house rules. They're amazing. They're fun. They make the game different. They make it unique. They make it your own. They allow you to experiment and try different things. No game is perfect, and every table has different needs, desires, and demands for a game. One of the classic examples of my house ruling has turned into a game I'm publishing, which is my house rules for Marvel Superheroes. They eventually got so lengthy and so robust, it was a new game. So yeah. I guess that's the limit. When you get to the point where you've redesigned the entire game, maybe you've house ruled enough to just make a goddamn game, right?
Absolutely.
We were talking about that earlier. That's most people just end up publishing their house rules as a retro clone.
Why not?
I'm just off to fetch the Discord link, so just talk to yourselves, because I don't do multitasking at all.
I don't multitask. I don't multitask.
I'm really not very good at it. Really not very good at multitasking. So
No one
can't
is
talk
good
about
at
house rules.
multitasking. The human brain cannot multitask. It can only compartmentalize and switch between those things. The idea of multitasking is bullshit, nonsense, corporate speak that they threw down our throats to make us work harder for less pay.
You don't hold back, do you? You don't
I
hold back.
never have, never will. You only get one go round on this planet. Might as well make the most of it.
Right,
He
that's
calls
the
himself
link
Bear
to
for a reason.
that's the link to my
Actually,
Discord. I've just popped it in chat, so you're more than welcome to join. We play lots of games there.
Yeah, seriously, you should. Oh, everybody who's not part of his Discord, join his Discord. It's a great place. House ruling is it's going to be two schools, right? One that like it, one that don't, and that's hello, cat. I'm sorry, I'm being attacked by a cat now. Apparently, I'm done talking. Someone else go.
He doesn't like house rules.
Yes,
No,
the cat comes.
The house rules here don't allow him to have treats for every meal.
Well, it's cat house rules.
Oh, that's a different story, sir.
Oh,
So, Daniel, welcome to the stream again. How are you doing?
All right, guys. How about you?
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. You've just started running D&D for your family.
Well, actually, I've been playing like since '79. I DM'd
Yeah.
a long time ago. Got out of it due to life reasons. You know, you get busy, you don't have time. But yes.
And you're running. Is it basic D&D you're running, or is it AD&D?
Yeah, I didn't want to throw them in. I actually like, and I may get stoned over this. I like second edition a lot.
Amen.
But I didn't want to throw all those rules at new people. That's just way too much for anybody to honestly walk into, in my opinion.
It's called advanced for a reason.
Yes, that's why we're doing basic, and you can freelance. Hence, house rules. And some of them you come up with on the fly. It's like, yeah, okay, that works. We'll try it out. And if it doesn't,
is that what you're doing with your kids at the moment?
correct. Yes. And actually, I even did that back when we went from second to third edition. Some of my friends wanted to start playing. Now, mind you, this was a bunch of guys in their late 20s, early 30s. We all had very good jobs, and it was just something to do, sit around, drink, smoke some of whatever you want to call it, and hang out. And they wanted to play. So we had a lot of house rules with that also. And it was just, it was very fluid just because of the fact everybody was new. And it's when you get into those editions, it's kind of hard to throw that many rules at people. So that's why when we started up again, we're doing basic because there's not as many rules and you can just see to your pants it.
And it's easier for you to tweak on the fly.
Correct. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
It didn't work last week, so we got rid of it. We'll try something new this week. And the cool thing is you can even ask your players, is there something you want to try? And then, you know, because after all, it is a group thing. And ultimately, the DM controls it. But you have to make sure that your players like it also. Like, you know, when I played a lot back in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, we played every Sunday from you got to the house, my friend's house at 1 in the afternoon. Sometimes we left at 2 in the morning. and we had a set of house rules. But every once in a while, because somebody might make up a character, and they're like, well, I don't know, depends on the character class or whatever. They might be getting kind of short shifted on something. So you try and tweak something, give them a bonus. But you're like, hey, your ninja Kensai barbarian fighter. So they're going to back them off a little bit. You got to be fluid on it, and people have to be acceptable. And if they can't, then I don't know. Oh well.
It sounds like Bear's just had an accident. Have you just?
A really crappy chair. Garbage.
But yeah, you're right, Daniel. I mean, certainly, an attitude towards house ruling does depend on the way the group dynamics work. If you are meeting up for an intense an intense session where everyone is sort of used to playing by the rules, they might not take it. But if you are just chilling with your mates on a Saturday afternoon with a few beers, then everyone tends to be a lot more relaxed to tweaks and to house ruling.
It's kind of hard to explain. Everybody got in their character, and everybody was trying, but we all went to high school together, and we all knew each other, hung out together. But when you got together on Sunday to play, you were there to play.
Right.
And
okay.
We didn't dick off, and we went by the rules. If something needed tweaked, we did it after the session. We're like, okay, that didn't work. Now we got to fix it. But
and I guess that was a group decision to fix
correct.
something.
Yes, it was. It wasn't just. I mean, of course, the DM always approved it.
Yeah.
And,
but because, as I say, because you're all mates sort of relaxing together on a Sunday, you're all pretty much on the same page from the start.
correct. And even like we'd be at the bar talking about it, or at the gun club. A couple of us shot together. We'd be at the gun club and talking about it. It actually, D&D was a big part of our lives back then, and so everybody was correct on the same page. So it wasn't a big surprise, and it might have been, hey, let's try it one more time, and then we'll work it out. So, nothing was ever done in anger or on the fly. It was like, all right, let's think about this a moment and figure it out.
I must just jump in now and say, with chat talking about a Baldur's Gate 3 bestiality scene, with Gingerbeard mentioning something fairly lurid early on, and now Daniel mentioning his gun club. There's no chance at all of me monetizing this stream at all, is there?
Oh hell
no. None whatsoever.
Honestly, though, okay, now this is off topic, but it kind of pisses me off about YouTube and everybody else, because I watch a lot of gun tubers. How can me mentioning the fact I go to a gun range affect your channel?
I do remember there was a stream about 6 months ago, and Saxius said the phrase "play the trump card,"
and he got shut down.
And my stream got shut down.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of the things he said. Oh, it must have been Gingerbeard for all of his jokes. He's like, no, that wasn't it. And then you had it manually reviewed, at which point they got seemingly angry at you for having to review something so stupid.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. I got a big flag on me
on my
channel.
They shouldn't flag you for something so stupid.
just so you know, I am sorry, and I won't mention.
Oh, don't worry.
I think that's honestly that's ignorant.
It's
But
YouTube being
I
stupid.
won't mention it again. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You can mention what you like. This isn't going to be monetized anyway, so don't.
I
worry
like
about
shooting. I've gone to gun clubs. They're fun.
I only have about 95 of them. They all got lost in a boating accident last week, but it was 95 or so of them.
I like shooting up gun clubs.
Well, you know what? You know what's funny is that's actually where the least number of shootings seem to occur. Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyhow.
Anyway, we are off topic. We are
Way
off
off
topic.
Yeah.
We're in
is
the rambling phase, aren't we?
Yeah, that's a true story about when I did that review. It came back saying we're not going to monetize it because somebody has said something offensive, and it was flagged up as simply because Saxia said Trump. That was it. And my argument is, I replied to them saying, I'm not even American. I'm in Britain, and it's all about D&D, and it's a phrase that means to get the better of, to play their special power or whatever. Nope. And I got this big thing on it saying all your videos are going to be manually reviewed now.
Wow.
Oh, thank you for that.
Well, yes, because he angered the review gods when he did.
I did, yes, I did.
It's like you're making us do work? No, just because we're wrong. Okay.
Yes. And we have a Bruce for the first time on one of my streams. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Bruce.
Hello.
Oh, the dragon's looking pretty good there, Bruce.
Thanks. Getting work on it. And
That is nice.
For those who don't know, Bruce, you run 3rd edition, don't you? Or was it Pathfinder or something?
I run a lot of Pathfinder right now, and I'm redoing the 3rd edition game for what I want to do.
So you're open to house ruling then?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not even rewriting it. I'm taking the best parts of other better systems, which there are many, and I'm applying that to the game because I really enjoy the D100 over just D20. A D20 is fine, but it's kind of basic for my needs. I really don't like critical hits. I like exploding damage die.
Right.
And so I think that works a lot better for my needs. And a lot of people I know have already said, well, you're going to have players with just astronomical amounts of hit points. Yeah, wait until something happens in a combat and somebody takes like a 42-point damage from a single halfling sling stone.
That's funny. That's like my dwarf who's freaking awesome for our Saturday sessions. But, when he gets hit, it hurts. Because he has such a low AC. Thank God we don't do 20s or double hit point or double damage or anything, because he'd have been dead 52 times over.
One of the main reasons why our group won at the Games Expo when we played Index Card RPG was the exploding damage dice. The wizard in the party cast a spell which dealt, instead of doing 1d8 damage, ended up dealing about 30 points of damage to most of the enemies in the room. And it just went, everything just went boom, and the DM was like, oh, right, okay. I can see. I mean, for systems, it's one of those things where I think I prefer. Is it better than extra damage on a 20? Probably is.
If players like to roll dice, it is absolutely better. I mean, sometimes we forget that some of these things are just meant to be fun. It's like, well, you can do X and just do double damage. We can roll more dice and that. And again, knowing your players, where you're like, it effectively doesn't change anything. Yeah, okay, instead of we just doubling the damage, some of them want it fast, but some people like to roll that dice and get that excitement and like go for it.
It's the anticipation of, are you going to get a 1 or are you going to get an 8 on your damage roll?
So here's the thing, though, and this is for me one of the big problems with not having some sort of benefit mechanic on a natural 20 in a D20 game, is nothing sucks harder than rolling that amazing hit and then getting minimal damage. It's anticlimactic. It's boring. So
if you roll a critical with my game, what would normally be considered a critical, I'm going to just add damage dice to what you're rolling. Now, if you
But that's the
are
thing. Yeah,
using
you got to house rule it. Yeah.
say again.
But that's the point. You're house ruling it at that point in time. You're adding something extra to it because
I'm rewriting the game.
Yeah.
I'm rewriting the game right now. I've got the first 5 levels planned. I've got the arcane and the divine caster written. I'll be doing the skilled and the martial. Then I'll do the bard. Those are the 5 classes that everything springs off of from there. And really, the bard doesn't have a bunch of subclasses. The bard just has a bunch of abilities he might be able to pick up later. But I don't want the bard to be some sort of 5th edition Superman. I want to keep him to where he's primarily a support character all the way to 36 level. After about 5th level, you go from your basic class to an actual class, or a subclass as I call it. But I'm rewriting the whole thing based around the 3.5 3.x engine, and I'm using Hackmaster 5th edition as my basis for initiative. And that way people don't have rounds per level, or there's not like rounds. It's just seconds and minutes. So whenever you roll an amazing 2-hit roll, you'll roll extra damage dice. Now, if your damage dice come up all freaking snake eyes, I'm very sorry, sir. But I at least was offering I was at least offering you the opportunity to roll very well.
No, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not debating that at all. I'm sorry, I can't talk very loud now, so as a result, I sound like I'm just sort of, a noodle. I'm not. Still there, still have claws. The point is so look, I feel like a fraud with you guys here anyway, because I don't run any D&D. I stopped running D&D this year, and I don't plan to run it anytime soon. I run other games. I'm running my own game that I'm designing. I'm doing Dark Master.
You have run D&D systems. You've got
I
experience
have in the past, but I'm not
yeah.
currently running one, right? So it's that thing where you're interesting. Bruce does this and this does this. I don't do anything D&D anymore. I'm kind of done with D&D for a while, and it happened to me once in the '90s where I stopped playing 2nd edition and came back to D&D when 3rd edition came out. Ultimately, at the end of the day, for me, the core framework of D&D is the problem. It is a fantastic thing for what it wants to do, but what it wants to do is so limited that people have tried to evolve it over the years and add things to it and rewrite it and clone it and hack it and build it, that it's now just become a Franken game, right? It's just crazy. So for me, I'd just rather play games that are going to go more in the direction I want to go, and then save myself those headaches of having to rewrite D&D to make it do what I want. I went through that phase. I did rewrite D&D to make it what I wanted. And eventually I just got, turned off of it, I guess is the way to look at it. I'm trying something. I'm going to be playing some OSE with some people, and I'm going to see if I like it as a player. But as a DM, there's just so many house rules you have to put into D&D for me to make it playable. It's not worth it anymore.
And Bear, if you notice what Geek said, is he was talking at the beginning, we'll just use D&D because that's what everybody uses. I mean, a lot of us like other systems. I know I do.
I'm not saying you guys don't. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm not criticizing anyone. I was trying to make a joke, but I sound like I'm a fucking burn victim right now. So my jokes aren't landing.
I mean, the thing is, I know, I've seen your streams where you're talking about against the Dark Master, and that's a Rollmaster derived system, isn't it? It's a rewritten version of MERP, which is Rollmaster Lite. So I know a fair bit about MERP. I run it on a fortnightly basis, and I have my own little house rules for it. Are you running it raw at the moment, or have you adapted any of the rules in against the Dark Master?
Well, we're running it raw with a very minor tweak to a couple of the special skills because they're just wonky, and it's really, for me, a dumb thing to introduce something someone has to spend ranks on that doesn't give them any benefit until they have 20 ranks in it. So I got to spend level after level after level building up this one thing that's going to be useful 6 levels later, that's really nonsense to me. Like, so we added a little tiny house rule on that type of thing, but we're running it rules as written, and it has problems. It's a great game and I love it, but it has problems, and those problems are just design philosophy problems that are held over from the old 80s MERP Rollmaster situation.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's the nature of the beast.
I mean, when I run MERP, I run the combat pretty much by the book. But a lot of the other sort of skill checks in terms of the running on the moving maneuver tables and the other various tables, I'm quite fluid. I know Omanal was saying earlier how he doesn't like the hard success, hard fail binary. MERP is a system that has partial success and partial failure, and I expand that a bit further. If I often I won't even glance at the table, I'll just look at the roll and think that's in the ballpark of a partial success, or that's in the ballpark of you're about halfway there, and just improvise it from there. And that's my real house rule. It's not, I haven't codified it in any way. It's just my style. It's just my style of play. I just like things to rattle along at a good speed. And sometimes, as you say, there are flaws in that system which don't always allow it to rattle along at the speed I like.
That's my biggest problem with it, because it has two things I don't like: declarations before the round begins, which is something I find tiresome. And they use the same sort of mentality like the old D&D mentality of, okay, movement, okay, now ranged attacks, okay, now spells, okay, now melee. It's like, holy garbage. That grinds everything to a slow pace where people start tuning out because it's not their turn to do something yet. They're getting bored. Whereas I much more prefer the modern mentality of, it's your turn, what do you do? Great, okay, your turn's over. It's your turn, what do you do? Great, your turn's over. And then that way it just goes, as we say in Canada, it goes tickety-boo. It just moves right along.
I have the exact opposite experience. The turn-based 5th edition model, it's your turn, what do you do, grinds everything to an absolute halt and everybody gets bored. Whereas the old school way, where you go in your segments, is quicker and faster, especially at a table. Maybe not online, but especially at a table. It's quick and easy, and everybody loves it. They prefer it. So
wait, John and I disagree on something? No way, that never happens.
We're so aligned.
Was the DM, and it didn't matter. There we had pretty much the house DM. His name was Skip, and then there was Donnie and myself. The DM, it was a house rule. You rolled for the enemies. I don't care if it's a group of gnolls or a group of freaking giants, whatever. But then all the PCs rolled their initiatives, and that's how you went. And you better hope somebody don't throw a fireball on your ass. But it was okay. And it didn't matter if you had a sword or a bow. If you rolled a 1, you went first. If you rolled a 10, you went last. So that's how we did it.
That's 2nd edition, isn't it? Yeah. So if you all
those rules, we were playing under 2nd edition. It's not how I think the rules were written is that, but that's how we did it. Everybody, it was state what you want to do, roll your dice, and go.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I played.
And my brother was famous for throwing fireballs in bar rooms.
Oh my God.
Oh, I don't know how many his characters I killed, player versus player. I'm like, you really just blew up half our party. I'm taking you down now. I'd make the dumbass would roll up another elf with fireball and do the same thing the next.
I'm going to bring something up here because we mentioned this. You don't have to give characters their own spells and whatever they want.
Nope.
No.
I would have said
no. Nowadays you don't do that. Back then we did, but nowadays no. It's whatever I give you and whatever I let you find.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's how it used to be when we played back in the day too. We had to find spell books. We had to transcribe scrolls. We had to do all that stuff. I absolutely love, speaking of Fireball, I absolutely adore and love mapping now. I never did, but there's no more argument if they're in range of the Fireball because they're there. We can look at the tokens and go, you're right there, people. Life sucks. And we have one player who's a really old school guy who's like, he'll always be like, can we not bunch up? Can you guys move? We're bunched up. We're in the zone of death, and they don't listen to him. And as a result, every now and then I have a
Nobody
Fireball
listens
drop
to
on
me
them.
in first ed when I tell them Fireball expands to fill the space. Be careful about using it underground.
I use the template over the battle mat, and I stopped using a gridded battle mat. I started using just a white sheet of paper. I draw the terrain on it. I've got templates for 20 foot, 30 foot, 15 foot, and Fireball by the game we're playing is a 20-foot radius. So here goes this 8-inch diameter circle, and I start putting it over things, and the player will be like, no, I don't want it to hit my group. Okay, well, roll a knowledge arcane for you to alter the spell in the middle of casting. Your difficulty is like a 28. And if they fail, well, you see your guy. And if not, well, you manage to save your ass. But the bad guys are cooking. Yeah, that's good. Your friends are safe. But
I even brought that up last month. Somebody in our group in OSC had, I can't remember, it was something for sleep or something like that. And I even said, that can affect some of our people. You might want to watch what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, that even came up last month.
well, I love using figs at the table, but I agree. There's probably some people here that are doing theater of the mind. And what I'm doing here is just like for them, it'd be like for just like putting on shelves and never moving them. I use these figs for the game, and I got tired of using a graded battle map, so I started making all sorts of templates, and that seems to work a lot better.
I find that a grid turns it very much into a strategy board game. Yeah,
I hate that.
It feels like a strategy board game. I've never stressed really over distances, and I always estimate. And when we play online in the OSE game, the players are drawing their own map, and it's often so far out in places that they using that as a means of accurately measuring distance, they'd be a complete loss anyway. I just make snap decisions when it comes to things like that. If someone they haven't got to the level where fireball comes into it, but if they were to cast a fireball, I would say, okay, roughly where are you going to cast it, right? And just make a guesstimate. I think that's enough.
I'm going to bring this part up because this is why I like, systems, whether it's Alien or Conan, that have close, reach, short, long, and extreme, and go, okay, we cast it over here. This is about how far it is, and that's all I care about relative positioning. I don't want to get into the war game aspect because it can bog the game down, but I do like relative positioning. Where are you? Okay, you're within close range, which means if you just take a couple of steps forward, you'll hit someone, or if you have a long weapon, you can hit them. I'm like, that's great. That's all I need to know. If you're short range, then you're using ranged weapons. It's stuff like that. I'm going, okay, that's good enough. I don't have to think 120 feet or 115 feet, depending on what square you're on. I'm like, no. So yeah, and you know what? Most players are okay with that if it makes it within reason. A lot of it is. I understand where players were always talking about, and I had this happen to me many times. Everyone's fighting with each other about where they were actually located, and most of the time it's like, I just want to chit just close enough to tell me where you are. It doesn't have to be exact. In the reality, in the real world, most people are, unless you have a laser rangefinder, you don't know really how far someone is. You guesstimate.
I mean, in the heat of a battle, your characters wouldn't know these exactions, and I think taking the grid away and making them almost guess beforehand. I like that. I prefer it like that.
So go ahead.
I just want to just reply to Brian. My house rules for first edition. I generally played the game as is, but stripped things out. I removed first edition initiative and surprise and put in basic D&D, the version of that, and I just didn't play with a few of the rules that would generally slow down calculations. So my house ruling was more of a simplification.
I'm going to say this much, and I wish that 5e had brought this in because Basic did such a good job with morale.
Absolutely.
There are morale rules in 5th edition. People just don't know about them.
Well, no, I meant like in 5th edition, every monster had morale rules.
Oh yeah.
That's what I mean. And to me, that would have been really nice to have seen from the D&D standpoint. It's like, oh look, what does your character have? Oh, he has this. Oh, okay, and then when undead have morale of 12, you're never going to break them, not once.
That was one of the most fearsome things about undead. They didn't carry treasure, and they never ran away. The ones that were brainless, and that's what made them so tough.
Yeah,
They weren't they were never worth much. They
sounds
just
like my first wife.
undead were just there to hurt you, and you gained very little from them.
Yup, pretty much.
But morale's in 5th edition, but as has been the case with many players of 5th edition, they don't read the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah, 5th edition morale rules are garbage, though.
Yeah.
A lot of 5th edition's garbage.
5th edition to me is great if you just want something fairly casual, but I think that the problem is, especially with the online and doing the building of characters, take a dip in this, and then go into here and do that, and the players literally make their characters 10 levels in advance, and you go, well, you're missing out on the moment of players. Whereas that's why I like skill-based games. Skill-based games, like, oh, okay, you would like to learn pickpocketing. Okay, go over here. And that's part of the reason I'm beginning to really like 4th edition Warhammer. I'm just starting to read the rules and go through it. Because one is you got the occupation, and then you can start increasing your stats and other aspects. So even if you start off low, you can move up over time if you play smart. And then the other part is it's pretty dangerous if you play, if you treat it like a 5e.
I mean, to be honest, the whole idea of building characters in advance has come really from 3rd edition onwards.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, but go online. Well, let's talk about how you're going to do this in every level. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4.
Yeah.
And if you're a DM, let's be honest, is if you start calculating out all the different permutations going in there, now you have to be watching all these shows online to stop your players. And again, that's where the house rules come in. Now you can't dip into magic user unless you take 5 years off. What? Like, yeah,
that encourages.
But okay, look, I have a huge problem with how 3rd edition and later editions did the multi-classing because of the barbarian class. This idea that the wizard is going to suddenly dip into barbarian for a couple of levels, like, what? Do you throw your spell books away and go live in the woods? And how do you become a barbarian for 2 fucking levels? It's so stupid.
I hate that crap.
It's the worst. It's it's just annoying shit.
It's annoying by the way they play it. It's like, the whole concept of the word dip. I'm just going to dip into the level of barbarian. I mean, you can justify it story-wise.
Really explain to me. I want you to. Please explain to me how between 2 sessions a wizard can suddenly become a barbarian. I want to hear this.
Between 2 sessions, no. But
that's how the rules work.
Depending on, between 2 sessions depends on the length of the time of the sessions.
Yeah, you're going to give me the going native mentality, which I've heard is the argument before. The problem is that takes years.
Well, yeah, but that's just it. That's where the justification comes in. That's where you got to play it smart. Like, okay, so your wizard is going to go live with this barbarian tribe and learn their ways. Fine, but as you say, it's years. So,
sorry,
it's years. Wow. You don't just get to come back in 2 weeks and you suddenly know how to rage. No, you're there for years, as you said.
Right, but that's not how the game is written, and that's the whole point, right?
Yeah. Well, this is where our topic comes in. This is why house rules exist.
I will always say
I'm laughing at the thought of a wizard going off to live with a barbarian tribe. Anybody else in the panel or chat thinking about like some stupid influencer wizard going off to like some steep's tribe, and he like has his little knapsack and his little pointed hat, and he gets there at the edge of the the tribe where all the teepees are at, and they see him and they charge and they butcher his body and they hang him like a scarecrow for years. Because that's exactly what I thought of when you.
Who was it? Was it a Rockefeller kid? What was the one that got killed by cannibals when he decided to go native in the South Pacific?
There was that guy recently as well who went to the Sentinel Islands.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
the missionary.
Yeah.
Well, no,
not
but
allowed to go
this is
to
the
those
thing.
islands.
I will always say this: 5e has a good core system hidden within it, with a lot of extraneous shit put on top of it. BX has an amazing core system that it presents to you directly, with room for you to add your own extraneous shit for your table. Hence, in my opinion, BX rules over 5e because it allows me to add as opposed to 5e, which requires me to take away.
I think BX is the best out of all of them.
Well, I didn't want to say that bluntly, but yes, of all official D&Ds, BX is the best.
Yes, you did. You did want to say that bluntly. No,
Yeah,
Well, as I've said, I'm now running OSC and absolutely loving it because I can tinker and play and make rules up on the fly, and it's so easy. And the guys who are playing in the group, we're all pretty much of the same mentality. It's just sort of we're there to enjoy the game, and we all. It feels like everyone's got trust in the 3DMs that are running the games to run a fair and fun game, and that's what matters. And none of us are running 100% by every rule that's in every book. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because
the cool thing about the OSC and everybody running it, you all respect each other's house rules and don't step on them. And I can't remember who said it or when, but it was recently that it was, well, I got to check with so-and-so and see how we're doing this. We'll figure it out next week.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing. It wasn't, oh, yeah, just go do it. It was like, well, hold on and figure it out. And everybody's like, yeah, that's cool. Nobody gets pissy. Everybody has fun. The house rules, whatever rules are in place, everybody respects. But it also comes from everybody being our age and not wanting drama neither. That helps.
well, I mean, Doof's played and he's in his 20s.
But my thing is, all the DMs respect each other. All the players respect each other and the DMs. And it was, okay, well, hold on. Let's see how they want to do it. Gets brought up, and it was, okay, that's how we'll do it. So that's what I like about it.
well, and I think some of it, you have to. I'm not saying that you don't have other players. Age really does make a difference. Before it was, well, how powerful can I get? And as much as people want to talk about story, a lot of times we just want we want the story, but we want the story being evolving in the game rather than saying, oh, you're going to go. How do I want to put it? You can have little waypoints, and I already know how it's going to end. And instead, I know, like for Sean, it's like, I'm not sure where you guys are going, but let's see where this ends up. And you're creating the story on the fly rather than it being completely predetermined before you start anything.
Right. I set out the framework. They play within it. And everything's a surprise to all of us.
Yeah.
Ideally, at least.
With the way that I like the initiative to be ran perfectly at a table for myself, I would prefer to have all right, Tom, you rolled a 6 on your initiative. It's 6. We're going to ask you now, your surprise is over because unless you are planning for combat, you have a moment where you're flat-footed. But now you've rolled a 6. Now it's your declaration time since you haven't started anything yet. What are you going to do? Then Tom responds back, Bruce, I'm going to unsheath my dagger and get underneath that table over there. Okay, well, it'll take you about 7 seconds to get over there and do that maneuver. So he goes from 6 to 13. Now, in the meantime, I've got goblins that are making their way in, trying to batter down the door. And that happens on initiative 9 and 11. They're unsuccessful. Tom, you're underneath the table and you see the door buckling. You made it here. What do you plan to do next? I'm going to cast pyrotechnics or flame finger on the door. Okay, well that'll take you 5 seconds. The goblins in the meantime are trying to batter the door down. They're unsuccessful. So Tom casts flame finger at a wooden door and catches it on fire. Now there's a bit of a problem, but that's how I like a game to be ran, because I want to know what their action is and resolve the action and then ask, what are you doing next? That way you can set the clock for however many seconds ahead is going to take place. For a big table, like what I run between 6 and 8 people, that can be kind of a headache, but if you take good notes, you're not going to get lost.
Yeah. No, I mean, what I'm also looking at is, great, I lost what we were thinking. I'm going to say this much. Even in stuff like Warhammer Fantasy, when at a source book, it says, do you want to use this or this? And I think that's part of the problem that you're getting nowadays, is when people buy Tasha's or any of these else, they expect coming in that these rules be automatically accepted because it's it's one of the core books, rather than them going, and I know they specify it, but they need to put it in big bold, and maybe they don't do it because they're afraid of getting stuff in there. This is the core game. Anything additional, and I know they do it the same thing for Drow and several other stuff, but they're so afraid of telling players no. And I know that Bear's saying you're subtracting. Well, that's great, but at the end of the day, is all these other books are additional that's coming in, and the DM should never feel in that he has to add those in. It needs to be, hey, look, we're putting this in because I want to do it, or as a group, we like it better after we have the experience, rather than someone saying, oh my God, I am overwhelmed because I have to have at least 12 books and all of these things in here. And I have to put everything in, and my players have 10 more years of experience, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm trying to learn, and then this person's getting mad at me. And that's what I like about BX. BX is, here's your book, boom. The Advanced Fantasy, I know Sean's doing this, it's like, here's Advanced Fantasy if you want to put it in there. Oh, okay. And it's still simple enough that you don't feel overwhelmed.
Absolutely. Right, I'm just going to
like the splat book mentality that too many publishers have. And whenever you sit down for a game with me, you're getting pretty much a bare bones game, basically out of a core rule book. And you're not going to have quote unquote player options, but you're going to have a lot of options, really, when you think about it, because I'm going to be asking things, and whatever your town is that you rolled up from, you're going to have maybe class options there that others wouldn't have. And I think that goes a lot more to reflecting on a GM that respects his game world. That way he doesn't have, like, somebody says, well, I've got Player's Handbook 4 and I want to play an Azer fire sorcerer. And what?
No, that's just that's fun.
Like I'm not that GM that just allows any race class combo. Paladins for me are kind of a big thing. You don't see paladins everywhere. They don't last long, and two, like you won't meet an NPC paladin the same one twice, because typically they've died already, for their liege or for their faith by the time you maybe got back around to where they were at, or they're off on a crusade somewhere doing paladin like things. That's just what they do. They go against the enemies of their faith,
becoming martyrs.
I don't like the way that a lot of standardized books have come out trying to illustrate that this paladin got to a ripe old age. What the hell world was he in? Because in every other world I've seen, there should be reasons for these guys to have lives that end around age 20.
Well, the other part is what makes it, what do you really want to die of old age? That seems kind of boring for most adventurers.
I think that should be the aim for most adventurers, to survive and retire on hoards of gold and die peacefully of old age.
Just so you know, I wasn't
ultimate aim.
laughing at you about your whatever weird ass character class you mentioned.
Yeah.
The funny thing is I was actually kind of thinking about that and how people do that, and then they expect well, hey, I read about it, so I can do it. And then you're like, no, that's not going to work in our game.
Yeah, the word no is great.
Yeah.
I love
As a DM, you have to curate your options for sure.
I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing about the fact I was thinking about the same basic principle at the same time.
okay. I wasn't trying to take it offensive either. I
Yeah,
want you
okay.
to
I just wanted you to know, but no, because we'd have like the our main DM Skip. He would come up with these player characters that were just so off the freaking wall, and then like if I ended up running, I'd be like, "Where'd you come up with this guy?" Oh, here. Like, yeah, no, he's not going to work with this week. You can, yeah, because he was basically building Jedi's and shit like that. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Play a cleric, play a fighter, play a thief. But no, you're not doing shadow, elf, mystic, mage, ninja.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
no.
I'm gonna have to jump. I'm gonna have to jump in because we started the stream about half hour late, and we've hit the pumpkin time for me.
Yes.
I do wish sometimes that your clocks were correct over your side of the Atlantic, because that would then mean that we could have a stream at the time when we're all awake.
Well, the answer is that move to Canada.
Yeah, well, that's pretty
No.
straightforward if you ask
My
me.
clock,
Hey, don't do the man to poverty. Move to Mexico, sir.
my clock.
But I mean, we all know for a fact that British time is the time by which all of the times are measured. So that is the correct time. Anyway, on that note, Dungeon Minister did mention something earlier in the stream, because Dungeon Minister is running a convention very soon, Cleric Con. And he mentioned about whether to go with 3 or 4 hour blocks at a convention. And the answer I was going to give him was pretty much what Gaming with ADHD has said here. We block for 4 hours, plan adventures for 3, and assume issues with teaching rules and delays in play. Absolutely. And it gives you little gaps, natural gaps between the sessions. If you finish in 3 hours, no one feels cheated in any way. Plan for a 3 hour session and plan for a bit of sort of chill afterwards, talking about the game and a bit of sort of introduction beforehand. And that's what makes convention play work. If you try to stress to fit everything in 3 hours, it's gonna fail. So 4 hours, keep it nice and relaxed. Ask the DMs to run something that they assume will take about 3 hours, and it will most likely expand to 4. That's my experience from the conventions I've been to. Anyway, it is past midnight where I am, which
my
is
daughter just got home from her first night on her new job, so I'm gonna go.
And it is the, as we call, the pumpkin hour, the hour when my already fat head becomes even fatter and turns orange. And
good talking, guys. Talk to you later.
So I'm going to have to end
Okay.
it, but I'm going to say thank you everybody for joining in. Daniel's already gone. Daniel doesn't have a channel, so I'm not going to shout out his channel because he doesn't have one. And Saxius has been with us. He doesn't have a channel. And Doof was with us. He doesn't have a channel. Gingerbeard was with us. He doesn't have a channel. Elfbait does, so check out Elfbait. Also, Sean, do you want to give your channel a quick shill?
Yes, Mage's Musings. I'm working hard to catch up on my review caps. New episode
Bear,
Friday.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Excellent. Bear, do you want to wheeze your way through a quick shill?
Sure, don't bother subscribing to me. I have opinions you won't like. You'll just unsubscribe. Move along.
That's the life there.
And Bruce, thanks for joining in one of our chats. First time, we've met before on Legion of Myth, but first time you joined in.
I'm sorry that I don't see you more often, but I'm usually at work at this time.
Yeah, well, no worries. But thanks for popping in. And do you want to shill your channel?
If you want to hear some crazy, probably outdated opinions on Thursday nights, Shadow and Sun, myself, and 4 other dungeon masters gather around for Table Breakers, which is a combined 6 people. We probably about 60, 70 years of gaming experience. Just between me and Shadow, I think we cover 60. But we do a lot of discussion and deep dives. Every other week, I do run a live stream game, which will put you to sleep if you're not involved with the game itself. So If you have problems sleeping, come on over to my channel and subscribe. I do appreciate it, but I'm not going to implore or beg anybody to do that. I thank you all for being here and listening to me ramble.
Which channel is yours? Baron G Rock?
Nope, Bruce Lombardo.
Bruce Lombardo, okay.
Of Dick's Division.
Yes, sir.
Dick's Division, indeed. And Omen Owl, of course, doesn't have his own channel, but features heavily on everybody else's because he is you are a live stream whore, aren't you? Are you not?
What else am I going to do in the evenings besides go swimming?
Elfbait, I'm giving your channel a quick shill. So Elfbait has popped up in chat. Yeah, we're still here. We are wrapping up. I forgot the time, to be honest. I was looking for the 3-hour point because we normally go from 9 till midnight, and of course I started late tonight, so I overran a little. So we are wrapping up. Thank you everyone who's been involved in chat. Thank you everyone for popping in. Sorry, Gaming with ADHD, you've joined us just as we're going, because I live in the correct time zone, and you lot, all the rest of you, you're all wrong. You're all wrong, and that is it. That is the answer, because it's my stream, and I say so. Thank you all for joining. I hope you've enjoyed the chat tonight, and I'm going to be ending the broadcast.
Good night, everyone.
Good
night, all.
Hey, Bear, are you going to have something tonight running?
No, I'm not having something tonight, but